I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Ms. Sullivan has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Mr. Rhodes. Are there any comments or questions?
I have a question, just wondering why there are two asterisks by the two event,
Yeah, we decided that that was a good way to designate where Mr. Wallace could vote.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That was more for my,
Okay.
That was his
Assistance.
request.
Yeah, I know, last
sorry.
month they were highlighted.
it was all
so-
over, yeah. So-
Okay, I
so,
gotcha.
yeah, so, thank you. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, and we had a question. Any further
Is there
comments?
special?
Questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is to move into closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members of this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, Supervisor of Human Resources, Adam Constas, legal counsel, and Mr., is Dan joining us because Gail's out?
Yes.
Mr. DeVillio, Dan DeVillio. will be-
Oh, no. He is not going to go into closed session.
Yes.
It'll just be me.
Okay, scratch that. Mr. DeVillio will not be joining us. We'll move to closed session under General Provisions, Article 3-305B, Section 1, to discuss applicants for new hires, resignations, volunteers, transfers, extra pay, extra duty, and any other personnel matters. The reason for closed session discussion of topic is public discussion of applicants and employee names and personal information could discourage people from working for the board and contain sensitive personal and biographical information. Personnel information is protected from disclosure under the MPIA. And Section 7, to consult with legal counsel on First Amendment free speech and legal roles and responsibilities of the board under the Education Article of the Maryland Code. Reason for this, substance of discussion is protected by attorney-client privilege. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Ms. McGee has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Ms. Dorsey. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We will be returning at approximately 5:30 PM to resume. To the February 27th, 2023 Kent County Public Schools Board of Education meeting. We are opening the open session for this tonight after closed session. The first item on the agenda in Section 3A is to report on closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members, this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, supervisor of human resources, Adam Constance, legal counsel, met in closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B. Section 1, the topic was applicants for new hires, resignations, volunteers, transfers, extra pay, extra duty, and any other personnel matters. The purpose of this, the reason for closed session was public discussion of applicants and employee names, and personal information could discourage people from working for the board and contain sensitive, personal, and biographical information. Personnel information is protected from disclosure under the MPIA. And Section 7 of 3-305B, consult with legal counsel on First Amendment free speech and legal roles and responsibilities of the board under the Education Article of the Maryland Code. The reason for closed session, substantive discussion is protected by attorney-client privilege. The next item on the agenda, bear with me before we move forward. The session was for information and discussion purposes only. No action was taken. Personnel actions will be voted upon by this board after the 4B legislation portion of our meeting during Section 4 board discussion. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Wallace.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the board discussion 4A, decision to retain the France Law Group, William Chernoff, in Altria mass torts litigation.
So, Mr. President, members of the board, at this time I will turn it over to Mr. Constance, who can provide a little bit of an overview again about the Altria mass torts litigation. And of course, we won't talk about everything we talked about in closed session with regard to that at our last board meeting, but he can provide an overview of the mass torts litigation, and the board can make your decision in terms of whether you want to move forward with this litigation. Okay.
Mike isn't working, so I'll go up here.
Oh, man.
Good evening, members of the board. The nationwide multi-district class action is referenced as the Altria litigation stemming from claims brought by a number of public agencies against Altria, which is the parent company of a number of e-cigarette vaping device manufacturers. There was a previous case against Juul, and there's still a pending case against Altria, and the Board of Education was approached by the attorneys from the France Law Group out of California to get into the Altria litigation, as there's still time to do so. There is a basic information questionnaire that we'll fill out and supply to them, and just to be a part of this multi-district litigation. My firm is offered to serve as a conduit between Kent County Public Schools and the France Law Group, and what you have before you is the representation agreement from the France Law Group with the Kent County Board of Education. Also, it does note in there that PK Law will be like a liaison between the two entities for information sharing purposes. So it authorizes me to help facilitate the discussion. But it doesn't take up much time, doesn't take up much staff time, and of course there's a possibility of a small recovery at the end. A number of other school systems have joined this litigation and had previously been a part of the Juul litigation as well. You may have read about it in the Baltimore Sun, Carroll, for instance, most recently. So there you go.
How much would it cost us will it cost us anything financially to sign on with the lawsuit?
Great question. It's on a contingency fee basis, which means we don't pay anything if there's no recovery. So
Okay.
the only compensation paid to this France Law Group is out of a percentage of the recovery, which would be a 25% out of any recovery that Kent County Public Schools would receive.
Okay.
And we really just don't know what that amount would be. Any other questions I can address?
Are there any other questions? Okay, this is an action item. In the action request, this board will make a recommendation as to whether the Kent County Public Schools will join the Altria mass torts litigation. If the board would like to entertain a motion, then we could start the process.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Rhodes has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Mr. Wallace?
I also agree with that.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we'll I'll bring the signed agreement back to Mr. Shinoff from the France Law Group.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Constance. Okay, the next item on the agenda is legislation.
Okay, Mr. President, members of the board, I provided some letters to you regarding a decision to support local funding requirements under the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. This would provide additional resources for Kent County. It is House Bill 799 and Senate Bill 912. This is the same bill, essentially, that was brought up last year from the county. The only thing that's really changed is it's shortened. They had a lot longer of a requirement it was a longer duration for providing funding to Kent County. I provided you with the proposed letters that would show our support. I was in communication via email with Shelley Heller, and we talked a little bit about it. I did share the proposed letter, and she thought it stated exactly what it needed to state. And so I'm asking for your approval to send our support for House Bill 799 and 912. It's the low-density calculation mandated funding, and basically says Kent County Board of Ed agrees with providing additional resources to support the local funding requirements under the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Just as a side note, the money would not flow through the county directly to us. It would flow to the county, and it would help the county offset the requirements of the Blueprint. Kent County will experience a significant gap between the required increase in local education funding under the Blueprint and the projected growth in local revenues. The stress on local funding will significantly impact the school system's ability to implement the requirements of the Blueprint. We respectfully submit our full support to House Bill 799 and Senate Bill 912.
Do you know, obviously I recognize Jeff Grice and Delegate Jacobs' name. Do you know what other counties they're from?
I don't have that directly in front of me, no.
I just wondered if maybe they were other small counties, or Garrett out in western Maryland, or...
No, not all of them are small counties. Charles Otto is from Somerset. I know one of them was from, well, some of them are from larger counties, obviously. But the only small one that I recognize is Charles Otto.
I thought it was, maybe it doesn't mean anything, but, because I know there's also a companion bill that Senator Hershey has that Delegate Arendt wasn't on there, the delegate from Queen Anne's. Does that mean anything, or just?
He just didn't sign on for it.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead.
go ahead. I'm just looking, I pulled it up, I'm looking over it. So it isn't specifically for Kent County, it is for counties with full-time equivalent
is-
enrollment of fewer than 2,000 students.
But that's only Kent County.
But it's only Kent County.
Yeah, it's only for, we're the only one that fits those specific demographics. So it is only for Kent County.
I understand Garrett County might be there also, but basically this is for Kent County, and this is a 3-year extension. Is that on the original?
25, 26, 27, it says.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm asking for your approval to support Senate Bill 912 and House Bill 799. If you agree, then I will send those letters tomorrow.
Okay, the administration is recommending approval to support State Bill 912 and House Bill 799. Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
I'll make that motion.
Ms. McGee has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Mr. Wallace?
I support.
All right, motion passes as voted upon. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Couch.
Welcome.
The next item on the agenda is personnel. Mr. Hushin.
Thank you, President Cadet, school board members, Dr. Couch. Each month, the board receives a report of stated personnel actions. Those actions are discussed in closed session, and then a vote is held here in open session. The administration seeks approval of those stated personnel actions.
As Mr. Hushin just stated, the administration is seeking approval for the stated personnel actions. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Mr. Rhodes has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Hushin. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the wrestling team overnight field trip request.
Okay, this item was added to the agenda this morning due to a request from the coach for the wrestling team. They are requesting an overnight stay at the Maryland State Wrestling Championship to be held at Showplace Arena in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, on March the 3rd and 4th. They would only be spending the night on March 3rd. So this requires board approval, and the administration recommends approval of the overnight stay.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. We have a motion to recommend the approval of the overnight field trip to the Maryland State Wrestling Tournament on Friday, March 3rd, 2023 by Ms. McGee. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Mr. Wallace?
Also yes.
We have a yes as well. The motion passes as presented. Thank you, everyone. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the academic data discussion. This is from the side.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board.
Good evening.
Tonight, I have Amelia Markosian. She serves as our coordinator for both accountability and instruction, as well as Michelle Serino, who is our coordinator for Title I and also English Language Arts. Tonight, we'd like to provide you with a review of our local data. The presentation will include information about the kindergarten readiness assessment, the MCAP, the HSA, and 9th grade students that are on track, which is a measure that is part of the blueprint requirement. So with that, we'll begin with the kindergarten readiness assessment. So this assessment is certainly not new to us. The KRA has been around since the year 2017. Kent County has been one of the few districts that have always administered what we call census administration, which simply means that we have always required every kindergarten child to, every pre-K child and kindergarten child, oh my goodness, let me start over. Every kindergarten child to take the kindergarten readiness assessment in the fall of their kindergarten year. And so census administration is not something that was common in all school districts, but this is the first year that every school is doing census, and we don't have any districts doing what they called a random sampling. So just something to kind of tuck away and keep in mind as we look at the data. Kindergarten readiness focuses on responses that are both performance tasks and observations, and The tasks can be performed both one-on-one and in small groups. Every teacher in our district has an opportunity to receive training or refresher training in the fall, and they administer this assessments, which measures the 4 areas that can be seen on the slide: social foundations, language and literacy, mathematics, and physical well-being and motor development. This slide basically captures performance over a number of years, from school year 2018-19 to the current year, 22-23. And so kindergarten readiness data has always been a point of pride for our school district. You'll see by looking at the green that our students in 2018-19, 53% of our students were at what they call the demonstrating readiness level. So again, demonstrating readiness means that they are fully ready for kindergarten. And we have remained pretty consistent through the years, and this year we did see a dip in our performance from 53% to 43% fully ready for kindergarten. In an effort to try to understand the data and see what's the story behind the numbers, we have had ongoing conversations both at the classroom level, the school level, and the district level. And just as a note of interest, one of the things that we've learned is our pre-K classrooms are usually a place for learning for almost every child within the county. So if you're looking at this slide right here, in the school year 2018-19, we had 92% of the children that took that assessment attended our pre-K. And slide on over to the current year, 22-23, this year, 78% of the students that took the assessment attended our pre-K. So keep in mind that we had a little bit of a slide in the number of students that were attending our pre-K program, and some of that had to do with fully returning after the pandemic. I think, again, that was another example where several families chose to keep their students home, and then some were a little reluctant when we did that hybrid model to send them back as well. So all of these things in a small district has a big impact on the outcome. If we were to take out the students that did not attend our program, our performance level would be at 52. So that tells you, again, we looked at the data, we sliced and diced and looked at it all different ways. But trying to understand if there's anything drastically different with what we're doing and what it is that we need to do to continue to help all students be successful.
And can I
So-
just interrupt for 1 second? One of the things that we saw across the state is that many parents opted to keep their students out of school during the pandemic, the pre-K students, just simply because they didn't want them to do online learning. It didn't make sense to them, especially when we were going hybrid. And so a lot of them opted out and didn't attend any pre-K. So I think it was important to look at the data very closely, especially the ones that did attend our pre-K, see how they performed, and then just noticing, get our kids back into attending our pre-K.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
And it's about another school district, so I would understand if you didn't have the answer. First of all, I remember a couple years, we led the state, or we were like second in kindergarten readiness. And I get all the things Dr. Couch is saying about COVID. Any idea why Worcester's off way ahead of everybody? Significantly ahead of everybody else?
Significantly ahead. We have been in touch with them just to review what it is that they're doing with their core curriculum to see if there were any significant differences. And there are some things in terms of administration of the assessment, so we're still under the investigation phase of that. We're learning things like, in some cases, they give certain portions of it one-on-one instead of giving it in a small group. That may make a big difference.
Okay.
It's looking at every little nuance in terms of the administration to see what it takes to, get the best results that we can get for our students.
Yeah, I get that. It's like you're trying to put us in the most favorable light and explain why another school district, moved the shelves around and made it look better, but I'm talking about actual what's going on in the classroom. If they
Correct.
were doing something different that helped their kids,
So
that we could do.
we looked at their core programs,
Okay.
which is what you're asking. And
Right.
they do use a different core program than we do. We've partnered with the University of Maryland, and we've had the good fortune to be able to ask them to help us take a look at the correlation between our current, what they call Children Study Their World. You may remember that was a new adoption right prior to the pandemic. So our teachers have had training in that. It's an integrated early literacy program, and we were trying to see, is there any correlation in terms of the actual resources that we're providing to our students. Certainly, we've learned with all of the emphasis on the science of reading that we want to beef up those foundational skills. So this year, one of the things that we are supplementing is called a Haggerty. It's a program, it's the Haggerty program. And they also use that in that county. So
Okay.
again, we try to take lessons learned and see if there's anything that we can do differently. I think it's an important question.
Thank you.
If you take a look at the results by district, again, I think Ms. McGee just pointed this out. You'll see Worcester is out there at 73%, and the range is from 31 to 73. Kent County still is 1% above the state average, but as we said a moment ago, has taken a dip in terms of overall readiness. So with that, I would like to move on to let Amelia tell you a little bit about our testing history. This piece becomes important because as we look at the state assessment, you know, we want to make sure we fully understand that we were taking a different assessment the last time we tested at the state level. So I'll let Amelia share that with you and tell you a little bit about it.
Good evening. I wanted to share some testing history with the board members just to make sure that we have clarity that there's been many changes and many interruptions over the last few years to state testing. So in 2018, 2019, state testing occurred, but it was PARCC testing, and there were 5 levels of proficiency. In 2019, 2020, in January, we still had that January fall block testing occur with our high school students in English 10, algebra, biology, and government. However, in spring, it was waived because of all schools, in all schools in Maryland due to COVID. In 2020 and 2021, no state testing occurred also due to COVID. In 2021 and 2022, we had early fall testing in place of spring 21. All students took early fall assessment. And state testing of our new MCAP assessments happened in the spring of that year. In this year, 22-23, state testing is scheduled to occur as normal. And, is it the arrow? Got it. All right. MCAP 21-22 data is what we're going to show you tonight, and this was a new state assessment, and the first full administration was in the spring of last year, 2022. Students in grades 3 through 8 or enrolled in English 10 and Algebra 1 in high school took the full-length versions of MCAP ELA and MCAP Math for the first time since 2018-2019. This last point that I want to make, I wanted to bring to your attention because of the amount of time our students endured in testing last year. Last year's 9th graders that took Algebra 1 had to also take all of their early fall 8th grade tests, ELA, Math, Science, and Social Studies in early fall 2021.
Under the blueprint for Maryland's future, MSDE is tasked to complete a study on incorporating neighborhood indicators of poverty. And this is used to determine eligibility for things like concentration of poverty schools. And as you know, in Kent County, we have both Garnett as well as Rock Hall Elementary that both receive additional funding because they are concentration of poverty schools. This is important information to understand because this slide shows that instead of relying on what we typically do, which is the free and reduced meal application to determine poverty for each school, to determine whether or not students qualify for free and reduced meals. There is now consideration to use more than one measure for determining poverty, and incorporating other measures such as level of education, home ownership, and these types of things will create a more equitable and accurate identification both of students and schools in need of additional resources and support. MSDE has created Maryland Neighborhood Tiers, and these tiers, this tiered system assigns...
Let's say they're recommending, they have...
Recommending,
Yeah.
and this, again, this is important information. I think it's giving us the big picture of understanding the different poverty levels. Thank you, Dr. Couch. So they are recommending this. The tiers, the scores assigned to each tier, each neighborhood, are defined by the census block group. And so what we know is that the socioeconomic status of a student's parents or guardian is the strongest predictor of academic achievement and educational attainment. In other words, both poverty and place matter. So it is significantly more challenging to grow up poor in a poor neighborhood than it is to grow up poor in a better resourced neighborhood. Again, helping us understand how the concentration of poverty schools and those additional funds are going to help our students and the schools be as successful as possible. Kent County is one of only 6 local school systems. As we look at this next slide, these are the tiers. Tier 5 being neighborhood blocks of low socioeconomic status, determined by those various indicators that I showed on the previous slide, Tier 4, 3, 2, and 1, with Tier 1 being of high socioeconomic status. Kent County is one of only 6 local school systems that have 0 in the Tier 1 level. Again, just important to understand. I know sometimes when we're comparing our district to other districts, we don't have the full picture, and this gives us just yet another lens to consider as we're looking and determining how we can best support our students and their families.
Keeping in mind that the highest poverty is 5. So if you look at some of our school systems on the shore, you'll see how we compare with them, the level of poverty that we have in Kent, and the lack of high socioeconomic groups that we have in our school system in Kent.
So these numbers are looking at the entire county
Yes.
socioeconomic levels, and not just the families that are enrolled
Correct.
in Kent County Public Schools. Okay.
And considering the various levels that were described in that previous slide. So when you go back here, taking into mind home ownership, the neighborhood, they come up with a new way of measuring census block. And again, there's a whole report that's out from MSD. I don't want to, for 1 minute, act like I have a deep understanding of the entire report, but to me, there was a strong correlation that's important to bring to your attention in terms of comparing our district to other districts and understanding that we have a significantly higher level of poverty within and across our district.
Within the entire
Yes.
district.
Right.
What does the number 1 mean again?
High socioeconomic.
So we do not have any census blocks that fall in that Tier 1. And if you look, it's almost flipped when you compare us to Queen Anne's County. About 70% of ours fall in those top 2 tiers, Tier 4 and Tier 5, which have the greatest amount of poverty.
So Dorchester County is the only one that has a number 1, correct?
Dorchester County has number 1.
It says it at the bottom, unless I'm reading it.
No, you're reading that correctly. There's a Tier 1, a very small population of Tier 1 on the Eastern Shore.
Dorchester is Tier 2. Yeah.
Thank you. It's hard to see it on.
So it's a slightly, there's a slightly darker green.
Oh, is that?
Can
what
you
it
see
is?
it?
Oh,
Right,
okay.
it's hard to read it on-
Because I'm looking at a
Doesn't
green that
actually
looks
have
2,
one.
but it's Tier 2 and not Tier 1.
Okay, I just-
Okay.
So they made a deep green and then a little bit light.
So.
Okay, I got you.
Thank you.
And so what they've done, and that's, they've numbered the amount of census blocks that they have in each one of those tiers.
And then the percentages are to the
So they have one
side.
census block in Tier 2 in Dorchester.
Just curious, is there a way, I mean, I doubt the state looked at it this way, but I'm wondering if they show the last 5 years or last 10 years running, where it's only Kent-specific, showing these groups over
Yeah.
time? You know, how does that, I
Right.
don't think they,
Well,
I
and I
didn't see it
think-
at the data walk, but I'm just wondering.
Correct. This is such a new measure, and
Yeah.
I think the whole point being that we are underfunding some of the districts that need that additional support for these neighborhoods where
Yeah.
they're not getting the resources that are needed. And I think it's one of Mr. Chaudhry's passion is to get out there and help everyone understand that we need to put our money where the kids need it the most. And this is, I think, the first year that we're able to look at it in this type of format.
It'll be interesting to see how the
Over
color,
time.
the color changes over time, the brackets change over time.
Yeah.
So that leads us to the performance of our students against spring 2021-22 in the area of English language arts, and Michelle Serena is going to step up and share a little bit of information about this.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This graph that you are looking at right now shows all of the counties in Maryland and how they performed last year on MCAP in grades 3 through 8. The state average was 44% proficient, and Kent County was 9% below the state average. We were at 35%. You can see there's some variability. The lowest was 21% in Baltimore City, and the highest was in Worcester County, which was 64%.
That kind of, in a way, equals where we are statewide in our scores in general, moving up to 18th or whatever.
Right.
When we were at one point just above Baltimore City, at least
Right.
we've
We're
moved,
up.
improved. I mean, it's still really low, but at least we're moving in the right direction.
On the next chart, like you said, we still have a lot of work to do, but as you see here, we have made some significant improvements. We were one of 3 counties that actually exceeded our 2019 level, and we're the only county that had a 6 percentage point growth.
Yeah, and this was something that State Superintendent Chaudhry talks a lot about during their presentations, is they not only look at where you are with state proficiency, they also look at how you're growing students. Are you making that growth? That's the biggie. I mean, it's a fine line that you have to go through, but you need to be showing and demonstrating some growth.
So is that the largest growth in the state or just on the Eastern Shore?
On the Eastern Shore.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, I don't have all the others, but we figured you all wanted to see on the Eastern Shore.
Yeah.
So we were going to add to that we have a significant rebounding effect from the pandemic and have returned to pre-pandemic levels in this ELA data.
I love this next slide. So you've heard us talk about the science of reading and all of the emphasis we had on trying to help our students gain those foundational literacy skills. So this is an interesting way to kind of look at the data. This is showing students in 2021. Now keep in mind that it's a little tricky because you're not really comparing apples to apples. In fall 2021, I mean, on the left-hand side, this was measuring how our students did on those, what we called the mini assessments, the fall, abbreviated assessments. So the third graders in 2021, 75% were at that lowest basic level. And when you look at this cohort, as they moved from third grade to fourth grade, you'll see there was a significant change, and fewer students were now performing at that lowest level, 52%. So most students that were proficient on the third grade test remained proficient on their fourth grade test. Fewer students were performing at that most basic level. And again, one of the things I've learned is the state is really interested in getting away from just looking at one target, where you're saying, let's just look at the raw proficiency. That can be a little dangerous because you miss all those opportunities to recognize growth with cohorts of students. And this slide shows you an example of how you might look at the same students moving from one year to the next year. And I do believe that's the intention with the new assessment, to continue to look at the data in just such a way.
So the numbers like 75, 52, and 23, those are actual numbers of students and not percentage?
No, that's percent proficiency. So let's go back to it again. So on the left-hand side, 75% were performing at the lowest level. They were not, 31% of the students, thank you for correcting me, it is the number. I'm getting
Okay,
all
because I was going to
excited.
say.
You are absolutely right.
No, the reason I'm asking is because I'm trying to figure out if it's 100%. Because
Yeah.
if I'm looking at the third grade test and it tells me 75%
Thank you for having me
weren't
slow down.
proficient,
Yep.
that makes me think only 25 were, and then moving up, only 23
Say
were.
five, yeah.
So, okay, that makes more sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like a redo on that one, so thank you. It was the number of students, not
Okay.
percent proficient. Thank you. All right, Michelle's going to share a little bit about the English 10 test.
So this chart's similar to the one that we looked at previously, this one showing the English 10 test in comparison to all the other counties. The state average was 53%, and Kent County was 5% above the state average. I think it's interesting to note, too, that there were only 3 other Eastern Shore counties that performed better than Kent County: Cecil, Queen Anne's, and Worcester County.
Some people wouldn't consider Cecil Eastern Shore. I don't. But anyhow, yeah.
This slide is really showing us the mathematics assessment 3 through 8 for the LEAs 21-22. And what you'll notice when you compare this to the English language arts, again, overall performance was significantly down. The range is from 7% in Baltimore City, but it only goes to 38% for the highest performing district. Kent County was 8 percentage points away from the state average. And again, the statewide percentage of students scoring proficient on math 3 through 8 is 22%, and Kent County is at 14%. Because we're so small, we know that every student matters, and in this particular case, it's led us to some major shifts. As you know, since the start of the pandemic, we've adopted illustrative math, which is an entirely new core math program, and our teaching staff has been involved in intensive professional development and working to help our students understand those standards and what it means to achieve proficiency in each and every grade.
Can I ask you a question about math specifically, noting how low the scores are in general? I had heard someone say, and I was going to ask you if you agree with this, that math scores in general were down because of the pandemic, while a lot of parents could probably help their kids read and read to them. Most parents are really challenged themselves with math, and that's why math took such a big hit, and it's going to take a while to get back.
I 100% agree, and it's even in my notes. I had the same notation down.
That's absolutely a theory. I mean, we don't have any absolute proof of that, but it sure seems that correlates with that assumption.
Students must master one standard in order to move to the next level in math, unlike reading where it's spiral and you can have opportunities to read more complex text, but you'll be learning about main idea and specific things year after year after year. So math is very linear, and it takes that deep understanding. On our state assessment, unlike you would see on some of the other assessments, in order to be proficient, our students not only need that basic math, but then they have to be able to explain their answer as well. So they have to be able to go in and show what they know and describe how they arrived at their particular
I think in
answer.
reading and English language arts, you can catch up. Math is one of those kinds of things. If you can't add and you move up to a next level, you can't do it because you literally have to build on those skills.
You have to master it.
Can I ask a question? What could you do to help the parents so that they're able to help their children? Because the way that you do mathematics now, we as parents have no clue to what you're doing, and we can get the answer. It's not that we're slow. We actually can work a problem and get the answer, but it's not the way that you do it. So it's told to the children and to us that it's wrong. So because of that, we cannot help them. Because if we do, then all their work is wrong, whether it's the right answer or not. So what can we do to work together so that our children will, be more efficient with what they're doing?
I think that's a great question. And one of the things we know is that all three elementary schools are Title I schools, and a big part of that is the requirement to have families engaged in their student learning. So when you think about ways to do that, it would include some very simple pieces, such as math examples for families at home. And so we have some of that available online, but I think, again, intentional with giving not just the problem, but some of the sample solutions. Like you're saying, if you were solving it what we would call a tradition algorithm, that may not be enough to show what they know on the assessment. So I hear you loud and clear. It is different in some cases, and they have to learn to solve problems in multiple ways. So it's not an easy thing. Parent outreach is important, and I think hosting family nights and offering those parent tips and tricks and brochures are a couple great ideas. But we're also open to, if you have any other thoughts or suggestions, I think we can learn best from each other.
I do know that one of the problems that I've experienced is that we do not have examples anymore. Now, when they had books, we could go to the book, find the example, work the problem, and help our children. Even if it was something that, hey, when I was in school, I actually didn't do good with this, or I've never seen it. The thing is that I could work the example and I could find for myself how to do it. Now you do not have that. They have a computer, and I don't see anywhere on it that it actually shows the example. Not the parents aren't aware of. And a lot of the children, too, I feel like that when they're in class and they may not catch on or they do not understand, the class has to move. So, like you said, most of the math that they do, they'll find that one level, when they're at one level, it helps them to do the next thing and then the next thing. So, say for instance, you didn't get something 3 times back, then you're not going to know what to do now that we're up at level 6. And they're just totally lost.
I think you're saying some really important information in terms of the struggles that our students are facing right now. And I have to give credit and a shout out to our teachers. Today we were in classrooms. It was part of what we're doing is a learning walk. And for the first time I saw a teacher do something incredibly creative. So as they, not the first time it was creative, but the first time I had seen this. So they had the standard they were working on. This was a teacher in 6th grade. Yet, because so many students were at different levels, she posted that same standard and what it looked like in 5th grade and what it looked like in 7th grade. So the students could understand that, again, if they were not ready for that 6th grade standard, they were getting support going back to the 5th grade standard to see what it is that they need to learn to be able to get to that next level. If they had mastered it, they could go on and see what's next as well. So I think there's no easy answer to what you're asking. I hear you, and I think we need to really be very deliberate with what it is that we can do with families perhaps that are, obviously they're not in there for the lesson. So what is it that we can do to offer support, some tips and other resources?
And one last thing, and I won't say anything else. Could you maybe issue folders or have them bring a folder, and then you could just give them those example problems so that way it would be already a part of their, they would have that so the parents could say, oh, well, let's look in your folder and see if you have an example of this, especially in the earlier grades.
Right.
Instead of having a meeting that they can't attend because I have to work, or, I don't have a car, so I couldn't get out.
Right, just making it more accessible.
Yes.
We talked briefly last week at the Citizens Advisory Committee, it sort of touched on this a little bit about the interventions that are taking place now this year and how they were needed after coming back from the pandemic. Do you envision a continuation of the enrichment and intervention programs at all of our schools again next year, to the extent that they are now. I know every student is in something now, from what I understand.
So there's a commitment countywide, absolutely, and funding to support it through Maryland Leads to continue for the summer, full programs in every school, and then again next school year, full intervention and acceleration opportunities in every school. But I think, again, the commitment that I hear from our teachers in the classroom is this is not something we're just doing in response to the pandemic. It's best practices for instruction. It's really being intentional and understanding each individual child's needs, where they are, and addressing it right there, sometimes whole group, but most often in that small group setting. So I don't see this going away.
Well, we've been lucky because we have funding for 2 years through the Leads grant, but when that money dries up, it just adds to the budget challenges.
To Aretha's point also, I'll say that I'm part of the school improvement team at the middle school, and they have parents and teachers on that group, and we often talk about how can we bring a parent in and have a math night that is specifically about showing the parents how to do the problems that we're working on, the equations that the kids are working on. So I think it's something that we're trying to figure out how to get more parents to come in to learn how to help their kids also.
Yeah, but I think Aretha made a very good point that Ms. Giacomowitz addressed, that you can't always expect the parent to be able to come to you.
Right.
We have to go to the parents, and there are a lot of transportation is a huge challenge, and time is too. I mean, the ordinary 9 to 5 day that is a work day for us may not work for a parent who's working the night shift or something like that, needs the data. So sending home examples, I think, could be helpful, especially at the younger ages,
I agree.
when they actually might share it with their parents.
I have a question for you. So, do you have any of these teachers, do you have added teachers that are coming in to help, like these specialists or whatever? Are they working now with the students?
So, yes, so we have a couple different ways to respond to that. Based on Maryland Leads, we have what's called student support coaches. We call them SSCs. We've hired over 30 tutors, and they come in during the school day, and they work primarily with students that need additional support, both in literacy and in mathematics. So that's a little bit of the extra hands that are in the room. Beyond that, this is the first year that every school has a coach as part of the school staff. So in every elementary school, we have hired a coach, and that coach has instructional leadership at the school level, and they provide support not only to the staff, but also to the students. And they are part of that progress monitoring to see, are we doing the right thing? So we're not waiting until the end of the year to show you a report. All along, we have our hand on the pulse of, are we making the right decisions, and are our students moving in the right direction? At the district level, because of Maryland Leads, we also have a few instructional specialists, 3. And those teachers are able to go out, and they work at all levels, elementary, middle, and high, and they provide the support and the training to the new role, the coaches. So we have monthly support, professional development with the coaches, and then also on-site support. For example, and this is true for our coordinators as well, you'll often find them during the the PLC days, the early release days. Our coaches are in working with, sometimes it's a whole school, other times it's small grade level groups, providing that additional support and understanding of the curriculum. Did that answer what you were asking?
A little bit. So do you measure the impact that they have? Do you have charts for all that? And also, do they meet all the qualifications? Have they passed all the necessary qualifications to have that job?
So, absolutely. So we posted the job description, and only those that qualified could apply for the position. So everyone that we have in their current role is qualified for that role. Student support coaches are different because they are not certified teachers. They
Some
are
of them
part.
are.
Some are retired.
teachers.
That's true. I shouldn't say that. They are. There are some that are certified. There are some that are working towards certification. It's also connected to Mr. Hushin's Grow Your Own program. So it's multifaceted. I think it's a chance, and that's what we're doing. We're working as that sort of an entry point to grow our own teachers with that as part of it. But you asked about the impact, and I think that's a really good question. In order to get this grant funding, both Mr. Hushin, myself, Mr. Porter, and everyone else is required to continuously show evidence of what it is that we're doing. Is it or is it not having an impact? So most recently, and that's done through both qualitative and quantitative data. We use surveys, and that sometimes will give you the perception data from our teachers. So yes, we have that information. And then we also have all the hard data that we get from the assessments and other pieces. So there is a way to look at that impact.
So Mrs. McGee said the LEADS money, what runs out in a year or two, but will the Kerwin pick that up? Is that what, or?
Remains to be seen.
Okay.
I don't have an answer for that because I don't know precisely what the funding will be, what will be coming to us from the state and from the local. I mean, those new charts have not been updated, so I don't have an answer for you. But I do know that MSDE has been made aware by all of the superintendents that we really do need to find a replacement funding source for the LEADS grant, just because there are so many great initiatives going on, and we don't want to see that run out. So we'll have, that remains to be seen too.
The next slide is a little gloomy. These are the results of the Algebra 1 assessment. So across the state, you'll see the highest level of proficiency is 32%. Again, Kent County is 9 percentage points away from the state average of 14%. And so moving forward with Algebra 1, we have been doing a lot of self-reflection, examination, and work with the experts in the field. And in Kent County, we're looking at a year-long Algebra 1 course for our current 8th graders that may need some extra time to really understand those standards and concepts. And the supports for that year-long course are part of a illustrative math program, which is now the core program, elementary, middle, and high. It has not always been. There's also intention with the planning of our principal, both at the middle and the high school, in offering an Algebra 1 boot camp this summer. It will be part of the summer programs that are offered for 8th grade students that might need a little shot in the arm and extra support before starting Algebra 1 in 9th grade. And high school teachers have also started a praxis study group. We have the high school teachers working collaboratively, again, to build their own expertise and understanding as a cohort to see if there are things that we can do instructionally to help meet the needs of all the students. So Algebra 1 is an area that I think we continue not only at the local level, but at the state level to see what it is that we can help improve in this other area.
So do they have, do the students, I was looking today at some of these different testing. There's one called Pearson. I don't know what that group is, but do the teachers give the students practice exams like, because I was looking at some of them today, trying to do some of the work myself. Do the students see these practice exams? And do they work on them? Because I asked Dr. Couch, I'd like to see one of the...
You wanted to see an exam, and I said that was not allowed to see the
So
exam.
on this, are these exams on the Pearson group? Is that the right one to look at? Are they basically similar?
So you're absolutely right. So it is Pearson, and it's part of the MCAP assessment, the new assessment. We don't ever give the exam. Dr. Couch is correct. Teachers do utilize what they call release items. So when a test is no longer being used, they'll release certain items from that test. And I can give, if you guys want to show them a sample, we're passing out a sample of one Algebra 1 item, just so you can see a little bit of what our students are facing. This, at certain times, is given in 8th grade. And again, there's another cohort of students that take Algebra 1 in 9th grade. So between 8th and 9th grade is when they're asked to take this assessment. I agree. As you heard Ms. McGee say earlier, math is very sensitive in terms of the school disruptions, and unlike reading, it's almost always formally learned in school. The math we learn is formally learned in school. So it does it causes challenges when trying to help continue with the, help students address the gaps that they may face when they miss critical years of Algebra 1 preparedness in order to take that assessment. And I think you're seeing that not only in the previous slide, but take a look at this one. This is showing, again, the grades 3 through 8 tests, again in mathematics, and the decline from the school year 2018 to 19 to 21, 22. And every district on the shore declined in mathematics, with Kent County decreasing by 21% as well. So I'll pause. I know I put one thing in your hand and then I started talking about the slides. So let me just, is there anything that you wanted to ask at this point?
Yes, my question is, I understand we're below average and all that, but, I mean, come on, why are we below average? I mean, I understand you've been going on the poverty and all this kind of stuff, but this is totally unacceptable. What is this, 5% of math, and then it says the state is 32%. Well, that's pretty bad in itself. Why can't we, as Kent County, improve those grades? We shouldn't be below average. I mean, and Queen Anne's County, they're right next to us. They're doing wonderful. I just don't understand. We're so close, and I'm sure everyone here has different answers for that. But we need to improve. I mean, this is, in my opinion now, and I'm not putting the blame on anyone, but this is embarrassing. I mean, it's truly embarrassing that our math scores are this bad. Our teachers, I'm sure they're working as hard as they can. Are these coaches going to improve this considerably? I mean, I just want to move forward. I don't want to hear excuses. I want our grades to improve. And I know everyone wants the same thing. I know everyone wants that. But why are we so low?
I think looking at the sample item is a really good idea, and one of the things I will say is I'm in no way embarrassed by our teachers or our students. I agree, and we definitely have room for growth, and that's exactly what we're committed to doing. So as we look at this data and look at the scores, what we've noticed is our students have a strength in terms of understanding the procedures, but it's the application where they struggle, and that's exactly what it is that we're working on. When you have to provide that written response and explain your thinking, that can be a challenge. So again, now that we are in school face-to-face, have additional support, that's exactly what the focus is, with the intent of seeing the results. We thought it might be interesting to take a look at a slide that addresses, I'm sorry.
Just one question. Do you feel like the numbers that we see on these state assessments are surprising from what you see every day in the classroom? Are you seeing this low a level on a daily basis in the classroom?
So there is a little difference between what we see on this exam and what we see on our other report that we provide to the board, the NWEA MAP assessment, and we just finished our mid-year, so we're going to be doing a close analysis to see if there is a predictiveness with how they're doing on that and how they did on the state assessment. We do see at times they're slightly performing at a higher level on the NWEA, but again, this is the first time we've given this state assessment. I can't really compare it to anything. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Ms. Jacomowitz, I just want to make a comment. I think we're all in the same place with the scores, right? And I don't want to put out there, and I'm going to speak for myself, that we don't appreciate what's being done in the classrooms, because there is, for those of us that have been around, we saw it during COVID, gloomy. And to get to a place as to where we are now and the work that's being done, it's pretty impressive. That being said, just looking at the socioeconomic tiers by LEA, it's very easy for us to make a comparison to another county, but when you look at the other county is nowhere like us. And we can go through the state, and I can look at the Eastern Shore socioeconomic tiers by LEA, and I'm looking specifically at Queen Anne's County, And the way I see it, we're not even close, because we're a different county. Tiers are different. They have no Tier 5. I can go and look, when you take a look at all of the other counties have Tier 5 levels. Queen Anne's doesn't.
That's correct.
So I know there's folks that want us to be, and there's no disagreement that we should be the very best.
Correct.
And I don't want the message, at least for me, out to the staff and to the folks that, and the resources. Our resources have to be different than the other counties, especially the one that's right below us. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not trying to be, it's not apples to apples.
And I would add that for the longest time, we have not been able to put in the level of supports that we felt that we needed in our schools. So through grants, through a number of initiatives that we've been able to, making some priorities within our budget, we've been able to add some of those supports and some of those resources back into our budget. And one of the things that is very clear with the poverty indicator is that if you are a school system that is full of poverty, you need to be able to put more money into supports. And we have not always had that funding to do that. So we have been at a bare bones for a number of years with regard to, we didn't have what everybody else, all the other school systems in the state have had coaches in their schools. They've had more tutors. Worcester County, one of the things that they have that's different is they have an IA in every class. They've been able to put in an IA in every class. That's their model. That's what they've been able to support. And so I think we need to also keep in mind that we've been trying to be fiscally responsible with regard to our budget, and oftentimes it means some very difficult decisions. And now with all of the supports we've been able to put back in, we are starting to see some movement and some growth. And I too do not want to take away from all of the work that our teachers are doing. Do we need to do better? Yes.
Absolutely.
Do we need to be mindful of our data and look at our data to see what we can do differently, look at best practices and put those into all of our schools? We are doing all of those things. But I do not want anyone who's listening to think that I do not appreciate all of the work that's been going into making a difference with our students.
Well, and so I'm just going to continue on the path. I mean, if Blueprint works the way that it is designed, and there's still a ... who knows, and these added resources, where we've been versus where we are, so by the way, there was a pandemic in there, which it affected everyone. Looking at the numbers as we see it, what will it look like? I mean, we've been moving, whether it's the digger or whatever it is, we've been moving, school digger. We've been looking at that, and we've been looking at all of this different information. What will it look like if we had another 5 to 10 years of added resources? I don't know. But I know that, we're all hoping, we'd love to be the best in the state. And I just, it's a double-edged sword here. You're feeling kind of gloomy because it's like, yeah, it's not great. In some areas, in other areas, okay, it could always be better. They can always be better, but they're not bad. But you have to balance it with your resources, right? And I think, it's a challenge.
It is, and I appreciate the feedback and the comments, and I know our teachers are listening as well. I do want to provide a little bit of hope, and I think that's exactly what this next slide's going to do. So as MSCE was sharing the information with us at the state level, they had us really take a look at something that they're calling students that are on the cusp. So if you just follow me for a moment at the top, the English Language Arts Grade 3, we're going to go right across and take a look at some of this data. So this year, on the state assessment, 29% of our third graders were at the proficient level. We had 23, now this is a number, so I'm going to read it carefully, 23 students that were within 10 points of also achieving proficiency. In other words, 10 points, they were scoring at that level 2. We now have 4 levels. Our intention, and this is exactly what our coaches and teacher teams are doing, we know the brown eyes and the blue eyes sitting in that class, and if we're able to take these children, help meet them where they are, and bump them over to that level 3 of proficiency, we will see a jump from 29% to 48% in English language arts. That's the story of Kent County. That's the story of students that are on the cusp of proficiency. And if we're able to do that, that would put us above the state average of 45% in grade 3. Again, this is just kind of showing how we use that data. I'm not going to do it for each and every grade level going through, but it is interesting, and look at the numbers. Unlike in other districts where you're looking at 350 children that you have to move, I mean, math, 3rd grade, 15 students are on the cusp of proficiency, and moving those students will put us right there, almost exactly at the state average. So this was, I think, bringing inspiration, bringing hope, and seeing that this is very achievable within the schools.
So, Ms. Giacomo, it's safe to say that if the resources that have been in place, that have been helping move the needle to this point, continue to move the needle, or better, Algebra 1 in math will take us up 8 spots to the state average.
That's right.
And then potentially, as we continue down this path, take us even
Exceed
higher.
them.
Okay.
Exactly, and that is the intention.
I'd like to say one other thing.
Please.
I support all the teachers, but we need to work harder. That's all I'm saying in the school system. Something is not right here. The teachers are working hard. I appreciate everything that's being done, and I'm not pointing the finger at anyone, but we need to improve these grades. Somehow, something is just not working correctly here. I don't know what it is because I'm new on this board, but I want to see us improve. Years ago, I remember when Mrs. McGee was here, we were the tops. And the reason I bring up Queen Anne's County is that I hear it a lot when I go to different events at the school. Well, my kids want to go to Queen Anne's County because they have a better sports program and they have a better school system program. Now, we don't have the students, I get that, but I don't want to hear that anymore. I want to have us up. I want to have us up in the ratings. I don't know how that's done. Hopefully, the Kerwin's going to help out. It's a lot of money. Does money solve all the problems? I don't know.
Resources.
But I do appreciate what the teachers are doing, without a doubt, but we need to do better. That's all I'm trying to say.
Can I say something? Money doesn't necessarily, is not the cure-all, but I think at least with the information we have right now, and the wraparound services and all the extras, the resources, as Ms. Dorsey says, that right now we're able to provide, I think make a pretty compelling argument that at least in Kent County, with the demographic we're dealing with and the challenges we have, more does mean better. And like I said, I think that's a compelling argument to fight whatever battles we have to fight to at least retain those resources and try to get some more.
And what a great story. We started at one spot, and we moved the needle, and we're continuing to do just that.
Thank you.
And that's the thing, I was going to say, that obviously what is going on is making a difference because we are seeing the improvement. We are seeing an upward trajectory that we want to stay on. So I thank you for all the hard work that you're doing.
And so, again, kudos to the teachers and the building leaders, the principals, because never in my years of working in the district have I seen such strong leadership in terms of using data on a regular basis. So the work is happening. It's not a one and done. People are rolling up their sleeves with the intent of doing exactly what you described, which is not ever settling and fighting to get to where we belong, which is at the top. This slide shows a comparison. Again, we're trying to show you a way to look at the data in a variety of ways. On the left-hand side, English language arts, but again, keep in mind, that was the PARC assessment, so you can't really necessarily compare to the 22 MCAP assessment. Just taking that top row, I'm going to let Amelia tell you a little bit about the comparison, or is it Michelle? Michelle, from the left to the right. Sorry, I better pause. Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
So it's tricky to read, but if you just sort of follow along that top line, the first one is the park, and you can see that there is a difference of 9 between the state and Kent County in the park, and going all the way across the 22 ELA with MCAP, there's a difference of 5. So you can go down each grade and see sort of that comparison. And there are different tests, but in many of the grades, not necessarily grades 3 and 8, but in many of the other grades, you can see that the gap is closing.
We're going to do the same thing with the math, just moving across from the 2019 math park assessment that had 5 levels. Grade 3, the state was at 43% proficient, Kent County was at 26. The difference was 17 in 2019. But then if we look across at the other chart from 2020 this past year, grade 3, the state was at 36, Kent was at 23, and the difference was 13. As you look down that chart, you'll see that many of our grade levels, that difference is shrinking from year to year.
Well, the interesting thing is, it's pre and post-COVID,
Right.
and we've done better coming out of
Right.
COVID.
Yes.
Unless there's a different formula used to.
It is a different test. This is our first year with MCAP,
Okay.
but we are moving, so that difference between us and the state is shrinking, so.
If we wanted to follow the 2019 grade 3 over to the 2022, they would be the grade 6 level. Is
Yes,
that
so
correct? Okay.
that gets a little tricky. We tried to separate it with cohort, but then you're missing so many assessments and so much in
Right.
between. And we actually did try to make charts similar to that, but it was so difficult thinking about the assessments that they took and the years that were waived. So we weren't able to quite get
But-
that data. And
but
it's also a different test.
Right, but moving forward, we are going to start comparing
Yes.
You're gonna be able to
cohorts.
see
Yes,
cohorts,
moving
okay.
forward.
Because
we
what
will.
you want to see is as we put in more of the supports and the science of reading in our lower grades, you would expect, if it's, if we're seeing the results that we want, you would expect that those kids, as they move up, the gap is closing.
Well, and you still, even though you're not comparing the same tests, you're still seeing the difference shrinking
Right.
between those
Yes.
cohorts.
Yes.
Right.
Significantly.
Yes. All right, so we're going to be looking into the district data dashboard that kind of breaks apart these tests a little bit further. And I'm going to let Gina take this
So
one.
this is Kent County designed. As a board, you requested a couple years ago that we come up with our own data dashboard. Well, this is the very first year we're actually able to put state assessment data. In the past, we were using the local assessment, the NWEA, and we will still share that information, but this is a first glance, again, because we want to be able to look at not only how our students are doing overall, but also looking at the various student groups. And I promised Amelia when I came up here that I would share with you that she's still getting emails, she got one this afternoon, that there may be tiny different percentage points here and there, because the state is still going through and combing out all that data to get the information. They have not officially released the student group data yet. So we're giving this to you as preliminary peek at what it will look like. And what it does is it pretty much shows parallel to what we had seen pre-COVID. So we don't see significant drops, but we still see the gaps that exist in the various student groups. The one thing that we know is in a small district, at times we hit that asterisk, like you'll see in the ELL, and that means that we had fewer than 10 students, so we can't report out that data either. And last year, when we shared the information, you had asked us to give it to you in a variety of ways, and I'm not going to share this, but I'm giving it to you for your own viewing pleasure. This is every grade. So now you have every grade and every student group to go through, and you can compare both ELA and mathematics, the state average, how all students performed, and then how each of the student groups performed as well. And again, this is our own local dashboard. It's not anything that the state pushed out, but that this is how we are presenting our data as well. Be very interesting once we're able to give the same assessment next year and look at it from grade to grade.
All right, this next report is for our 5th grade students that take the MESA assessment, which is the Maryland Integrated Science Assessment, which focuses on the next generation science standards from grades 3 through 5. Kent County scored a 19.8, which was 10.8% away from the state average of 30.6. Eighth grade, similar assessment, still the Maryland Integrated Science Assessment. This is for eighth grade, so this is for, this is assessing next generation science standards from sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade, which is our life science, physical science, and earth and space science. And the state scored a 35.4, and Kent County scored a 29.1, which was 6.3 away from the state average. I wanted to highlight this chart, which was our high school spring government assessment. And this is kind of a different, they use a platform called Cognia, so they kind of give us different graphs, and they give us meeting expectations and not meeting expectations. So the state scored a 60%, meeting that level 2 met expectations, while our school district scored a 77%, which is 17% above the state average. And I just want to make sure you guys saw that, because we were pretty proud of our government students. All right. Our Kent County Public School had to do a On Track for Ninth Grade tracker, which was part of the blueprint. And this is data from now our current 10th graders, which were ninth grade last year. So the statewide assessment scored a 77%, while Kent County scored a 79%, which was 2% above the state average. And this measure is defined by the percent of ninth graders who earned at least 4 credits in any of the following: English language arts, mathematics, science, social studies, or world language. And this also puts them on track for that college and career readiness in order for them to graduate. And this chart kind of flows nicely into that last one, because it shows the cohort data from our Eastern Shore 9, and Kent County, as you can see right in the middle, is making wonderful growth over the years from 2019, 2020, and 21. Our students are still up towards the top there with 95.2% graduating, along with some of the other major counties on the Eastern Shore. So we are maintaining that very high graduation rate in Kent County.
It looks like we're the only county on the shore that was on a consistent trajectory of going up. A couple of counties went down, and a couple others are kind of stagnant.
Yeah.
And that could be because we have more
Yes.
room that we need to grow, but
Well,
I have a question. Do we have like lower requirements for graduation compared to other counties, or is it all at?
the state requirements are mandated by the state, so we have the same requirements across the state. Okay, I did want to just talk about where we are with accountability so far this school year. So in January, our high school students finished their state testing for fall block, which was ELA 10, MISA, Government, and Algebra 1 also. That our first block, when they took that first semester of those courses, they took that already in January. February, we had the updated 21-22 report card. Actually, it's going to be out. Sorry, this also came down from the state. It's moved back. I'm hearing the next few weeks in March is we're going to get the report card results very soon. So ignore that slide. I just got that information. January, February, 90 of our English language learners, students took their English proficiency exams. In March, our Student Day SAT for juniors will take place, and some of our high school students will test for the Maryland Seal of Biliteracy. And it is the start of the MISA testing for our 5th and 8th graders in March as well. April and May, state testing for 8th grade social studies, 3 through 8 ELA and math, Algebra 1, English 10, biology, and government will take place. And in May, our AP advanced placement exams will take place.
Do we cover the expense for the AP exams? Are we covering that now as part of?
So we require our students to take the AP exams, and I know that students that need that additional financial support, they work with their counselor in the school, and there is some funding available, but most parents will pay for the AP exam. And at this time, we'd like to open it up for any additional questions or comments regarding the update on assessments.
Any comments? Questions?
No, but thank you for a lot of information.
Yep, and thank the staff for all the hard work that went into putting this presentation together, and also for working with our staff to see what we can do to improve our scores. I think that there is, I agree, I've seen a high level of commitment from the staff, and everybody is focused on doing better and seeing what we can do to improve our results. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is our fiscal year '24 budget discussion. Ms. Stewart, it's showtime.
We are actually going to tag team this one.
Okay. Dr. Couch, it's showtime.
Okay.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
So, Mr. President, members of the board, what we wanted to do with our budget discussion today is really go back to the basics, if you will, and talk about what we need to do to develop a balanced budget. And looking at what we can cut in current year budget to reduce our starting point, if you will, for next year. So if you'll look at the first slide, we want to talk to you about sustainability of the budgeted costs and also to discuss about the budget request. That's the purpose of tonight. All of this information is going to help me as far as building the budget and helping come up with that final number that we have to reach in order to develop a balanced budget.
And Dr. Couch, if I may, just, this is the next step in the budget process.
Yes.
That we go through the various meetings that we have scheduled, and we'll continue to do so until we get to the finish line.
Right.
At which you provide a recommended budget, and Ms. Stewart provides it with you, and then we then go ahead and do final review and
Yeah.
present it on to the
Yeah,
county commissioners.
this information will help me in terms of determining how to come up with that
Yep.
final
Thank
budget
you.
that I would propose to you. The first thing is, we wanted to look at FY '23 budget. That's this year, that's current year budget. Our budget was for $30,780,914.47. We looked at where we were with regard to what our spending has been in this current year budget. If you'll recall, we used fund balance in the current year budget. So we wanted to see what we could do to cut out of this budget. And we were able to note that there were a couple categories that we believe that we can make some reductions in the current year budget moving forward for FY '24. So we looked at fixed charges. We saw that there was an extra amount of money in fixed charges that we feel like we can reduce that amount by $500,000. We would also reduce about $200,000 in the special education category, and that really has to do with some of our non-public students that we're anticipating that we will be able to realize those savings moving forward. Now, whether that materializes or not, that's what we're proposing at this point in time.
Can you give an example of some of the fixed charges that you were able to reduce?
Well, fixed charges includes everything. It includes insurance, it includes retirement, it includes all of the...
Is it all salary related?
Yeah, it's all
Okay.
salary related. So we usually have a bit of a cushion because we don't know what new employees are going to pick with regard to their insurance and those types of things. So we saw some savings that we feel like we can reduce that line item for fixed charges. So that, right off the bat, that reduces our budget by $700,000. So going over to FY '24, you'll see that what we need in order to keep what we have is $30,080,914.47. So that is the starting point for moving into FY '24. The next slide looks at what revenues will we be getting next year with the increases that we will see from the state and the increases that we will see from the local government. Our revenues will be $29,633,064. So that means, remember, we need $30,080,914. So we're already, just to be even, that's not even to do anything else, that's just to keep what we've got, what we've got right now. We have to reduce our budget by $447,850. That's the reality of where we're at with our budget. The next slide looks at what other things do we know that we're going to have to support. We know that there's going to be an increase in retirement. That means the amount of money that we have to budget for paying for the retirements. The $190,000 that we need because our health insurance always goes up. I mean, that is something we always have to deal with. That's a 5.2% increase. Retiree health is going up by 5.2%, so that's $28,556. We left on the late bus. I mean, that's still a question mark, but I left it in there. So that's $70,000. And then we are required by Kerwin to add a career counselor. So with the monies that we get additional from the state, we have to turn over $106,000, close to $107,000, to the Workforce Investment Board. That money goes to them, and then they tell us we have to hire a career counselor. That's the way Kerwin is set up. There's the Workforce Investment Board. So if you'll see, that's an additional $470,000 that we have to find place in the budget.
And that's a 2024 requirement?
That's 2024. Okay. So then, when you add the $470,000 that we know we have to support, plus the $447,000 that we're in the hole, we have to cut our budget. Just to be whole, we're going to have to cut our budget by $918,083.51. That is not even adding in any of the additional costs that we have for Kerwin as far as raising the salaries for our teachers, the mandated salary increases, all of those things for our employees. That does not include any of that. So that would be on top of that. So we have a very difficult road ahead of us with regard to where we go moving forward.
And that also does not include the budget request that we have yet to talk about.
No, we'll talk about those in a minute. That doesn't include any of the budget requests. That's in addition to. So if we decide we want to add something else in, then that number grows.
What do we project to have left in fund balance at the end of this school year?
About 2.1.
And that doesn't include the
That
500,000
does not
that we'll
include.
never touch.
Right.
Hopefully we'll never touch, okay.
Now, keep in mind, fund balance is one-time money.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like using your savings to pay for your mortgage. Once that's gone,
It's gone.
it's gone, and then you have to be able to sustain it. So,
Yeah, I'm looking at these budget requests and.
well, before we
Okay.
go there.
Okay.
What I would like to do is to have some discussion about what we need to do. I mean, I realize we're going to have to use some of our fund balance. I recognize that. I'm trying to put us in to be fiscally responsible with regard to how much we use. I mean, to spend all of it in a budget is, in my opinion, a very, very bad decision, because then it only accentuates and multiplies the following year, because then, you know, we're going to get new monies from the state and from local, and then you're going to have to try to insert that money in a place where we're not going to be able to sustain
Well, and
that.
if we don't have any fund balance, we've relied on it the last couple of years.
We've relied on it
to-
forever.
I know,
Forever.
to bail us out a little bit, but
not
like you
that
said,
amount.
no, I know, and
Yeah.
if we spend it all down,
It's
what are we going
where-
to do the next year?
Right. So what I am proposing is that we look and see where we can cut our budget, at least as a beginning, starting point. Where can we cut our budget by the $918,083.51? I mean, what is it that we're going to have to do just to be even Steven, so that we can then start layering on and understanding where we go moving forward? So I met with staff, we looked at, where we could go, because I don't even want to talk about new stuff until we talk about how do we get ourselves to a place that makes sense. And what I looked at is we have lost students, so there should be some places that we could reduce some of our staffing at some of our schools and some of our programs. But one of the things that I think we have to make some decision points about is where do we draw the line? In other words, what class size makes sense for us to be able to move forward and make this budget work? We have, I know everybody loves to have very small class sizes, but unfortunately, we're at a place now where we cannot sustain that, nor does it make sense to do that moving forward. So we have to come up with a number. And what we looked at is if that number was 25 students per class, make that the number. And we're already at that number pretty much at the middle school. We're in that pretty much, we use that number in some of our classes this year, but if we say that that is the number that we use, we should be able to reduce, enough to where I think we can get closer to where we need to be.
Do you think the reduction in staff, fingers crossed, could be absorbed by
Hopefully.
people who are,
Attrition.
yeah, I couldn't think of the word, but
Yeah,
yeah.
attrition.
I'd hate to take a job away from someone.
Right. I mean, that's always our thought is, we always see, we do see turnover. So obviously, through attrition, we should be able to make some of these decisions. But, I mean, it may be that if we don't see the reductions where we need to, we may have to go through a RIF, which is a reduction in force. We looked at a reduction, if we bump up class size to 25, almost every school would see at least one staff member that would be, that we could reduce. And that, we feel like we could pretty much take through attrition. We looked at our IAs and our support staff. We looked at ways in which, could we move some into our TSI grants, which is our targeted supplemental instruction, which is tutoring. Could we move some people there? Could we look at reducing maybe a bus route, consolidation of a bus route? That would give us some savings. We also need to look at health services. We've got a model right now that I'm not sure we can sustain. Right now, we have a CNA and a registered nurse at every building.
And we have both, okay.
We have both. And I was checking with our neighboring counties, and all of our neighboring counties only staff their schools with an RN, not an RN and a CNA.
Is there any way the health services that Chop Tank's providing at Rock Hall and Garnett can pick up any of that? No? Okay.
So, I mean, if we talk about that's what we could do, then there could be some savings in health services as well.
The concentration of poverty grant doesn't have something for our health
The
services?
concentration of poverty grant does pick up 2 of our RNs. But what I'm saying is, we still have the CNA there that we're paying for out of our operational budget.
Gotcha.
So those are all things, when we added up all of those things that I just talked about, I can get us close to $900,000.
I wasn't sure when you were throwing around, talking about IAs, if we bumped up class size to 25, would we be able to put an IA in those classes with the teacher?
No,
Okay.
nope. We'd be going the wrong way.
No, I wasn't sure what you were talking about, and I know that that has been a challenge and a concern for teachers that have a large class size. If they could have another adult in the classroom, that would help.
Well, keep in mind, we have the SSCs in there right now.
Yeah.
So we've got the student
Yeah, but that's-
support coaches
but
that are
that's
in
just
there.
for another-
I
That's
get
for
that.
next year, but,
I get that, but I mean, I'm just trying to be responsible for this year's budget.
Okay.
And so I can get us close to that. Now, there could be some other savings I didn't include in health services. I mean, I'm kind of, we kind of gone back and forth. We have not met with the health department. That's on our next, that would be our next plan, is to meet with them and say, look, we are in a crucial budgetary climate right now. We need to see what we can do to tighten up what we're supporting in our schools. And all of those things can get us close to the 918. And then that makes us even Steven for moving forward. And then we have to have some discussion about what we do with salaries. And that's another discussion.
so getting us close to the 900,000, getting to the quote-unquote even Steven, doesn't factor any
No.
of this? Okay.
None of it,
Or salaries.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
none of it. So I'd like some discussion about the class size of 25. I mean, we've done this before. We've never had a year where we've not had to reduce staffing in some form or fashion. The recommendations that we're looking at pretty much touch every department.
So equitable across schools as well as departments?
As close as we can, yes.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, if a school doesn't have, if we bump up to 25 and they don't get there, then we can't say, well, we're going to cut you just because we cut everybody else.
Yeah, I got you.
Could we turn to the volunteers that we've been taking in, as far as volunteers into the classrooms to help out the teachers? Because I do believe that it's trying on a lot of the teachers with the children that have behavioral problems and,
Yeah.
they're trying to teach and they're not behavior specialists.
Yeah.
I just believe that it would be better if they did have another set of eyes or someone to help them. And since we can't really, we don't have the funds, but we could maybe resort to some of the volunteers just helping out. here.
Well, certainly, I mean, we've got that ability to do that. Our problem is, obviously, some of our volunteers can't help every single day, but when they can, that would be helpful. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to dig deep. This reminds me really close to when we had to consolidate schools. This is probably equally as
Ugly.
ugly. Yeah.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I've been talking to my fellow superintendents around the state, all of this funding that we were supposed to get for Kerwin, it's just, I mean, we are seeing an increase, but the problem is, we are also seeing, we had salary increases that we had to implement for this year. And we had to get to that 10%, and we have until mid-24 to where we have to get to that 10%. And the monies weren't there last year. Remember, the county only had to give us $14 more than the year before. That's all they had to give us. That was their increase to the school system, was $14 over what they gave us the year before. And that's what we got. We didn't get a dime more, we got $14. And so for us to be able to sustain And to implement the salary increases, we used our fund balance. We used fund balance hoping that we would see the numbers that we should have seen. If I look at the printouts that you were asking me about, like how much money are we going to get from Kerwin, if you look at the projected amount that we were supposed to get $2.1 million. That didn't materialize. We did not see $2.1 million. Now, part of that is because of declining enrollment, but part of that, I can tell you that my fellow superintendents are not seeing the monies materialize in their school systems. Every one of them is faced with having to have a greater ask because it's just not there. I mean, we have dual credit courses that we have to pay for our students at the high school, and it's wonderful and it's great for our kids, but it's costly. Next year, not only do we have to pay for tuition, we have to pay for books and fees, so it's going to double. So that amount of money we have to be able to sustain in our budget. We have to get to the 10%, and keep in mind, we still have to get to the 60,000 for our teachers. So this is not the end of it. We still have a lot of future expenses that we're going to have to come up. So people ask, well, where is all the local funding going? And when we had the meeting with the county commissioners, and I had an opportunity to speak, I said, most of our monies that we're going to see with Kerwin are going to go towards salaries. I mean, that's the reality. That is the biggest ticket item that we have with Kerwin right now is salaries. And I don't think that I think Talbot saw an increase of about 8 million from their local this year. So they got lucky.
So
Yeah, they hit the jackpot.
So
We
just to
didn't.
clarify, their county government gave them $8 million more.
No, that's what they're required to
That's
give.
required to give, okay.
That's what they're required to give, yes.
In Talbot County.
In Talbot County. My understanding in Queen Anne is they're pretty much even. They pretty much are not seeing that big of an increase from last year to this year to next year. So they will be making an ask to their local government for additional funding.
And Queen Anne's has a track record of actually
Giving it.
coming up with the money when the school district asks for it.
Right. So I can tell you, we're in a situation where we're going to have to ask, and
So,
that's just the way it is.
I had asked you this before, just when you and I were shooting the breeze. A couple weeks ago, the new governor released, $600 million out of the state budget for education that the previous governor had socked away, so to speak. How much of that do you think would filter down to us? And if we did get it, what would we, your answer to me at the time was, it would probably go to the requirement to fund the teacher salaries increases.
Yeah, I guess it depends upon remember what we talked about at the last budget discussion we had, is the money comes in restricted pots.
Yeah.
So it depends upon how the money comes to us and then what that restriction would be. Like, for instance, if it comes, like the governor has talked about changing direct certification for Medicaid to be the governing criteria for determining Title I, which we use free and reduced lunch applications. If they use direct cert, then we would see a greater number of students that would fall into Title I, but that is more money for Title I. So what can we do with that? That will not fund the entire school system. Now, it may be that we can utilize some of that money to move some of our positions into the Title I budget. That's something that we can definitely look at. But it's all of those things are what-ifs, and maybe they'll happen and maybe they won't, but I've got to build a budget on what I know today. And I got to build a budget on what, I can't worry about the raise that I'm going to get tomorrow, or it's like when you build your household budget, you think about, well, is my employer going to give me a raise, and am I going to see a new job that's going to give me more income? I can't plan on that because I don't know what's going to come out of the legislature. And unfortunately, by the time that actually materializes, I will have already had to introduce a budget to you.
I have one thing I want to say. You're operating a business, which some people have businesses here, and you're in the same situation. This is going to be a tough situation to work with. I mean, I can see it. Hopefully the students won't, hopefully you can find money from areas that will not affect the students. That's all I'm saying. Like, I noticed earlier you had something about the, what was it, you saved $200,000 on the special education. I didn't really understand that, but what was that, you said out of?
Non-public. We have to, oftentimes we send students out of the district to attend a school that's non-public because of the level of their disability and meeting their needs. So we have to pay for them to attend a different school. Every school system in Maryland.
So a specialized school
Yes.
for what they have. So
Right.
it could be in Kent County or it could be out of Kent
It's
County.
generally out of Kent County. It's called non-public out of county.
It just, this
So
is
there
going
may
to,
be a change in the students who require that service
Right.
next year. is
Right.
what
I get it, I get that. This is going to be a tough job.
Right, and if you'll recall, when we presented all of the proposed expenditures on taking us to the end of the year, we were actually over budget in a lot of the other items. So I hear what you're saying, Mr. Rhodes, but there is no other place that we built a pretty tight budget this year, and there are really no other places that we can cut. If you'll go back and find that in board docs, you can see where all of the different line items, we are actually over budget in a lot of areas. These were the two areas that made sense, that we felt that we could cut right off the bat. And then you have to look at, moving forward, what other areas can you cut in order to be even Steven? And it's tough. It's not an easy exercise, for sure. And we try to be mindful of what's going to be the least impactful for our students, and just try to look at cuts across the board. I think that that's the best plan that I have, unless somebody has a better plan.
No, I was just thinking with you likening it to the, I'll use the word crisis because it kind of was, when we had to consolidate before, as painful as that was a big thing we could do. We don't have one of those big things anymore to
No.
be able to do.
No, we really don't. I mean, we really don't.
So are we going to be able to, like, focus on each one of these? Is that what you're going to do? Like, for example, mid-level administration or student transportation, like, are you going to pull these out as in separate line items and try to work on each one to see where you can save, or you just?
Well, we presented that at the last meeting, and we showed where we were over in some of those areas, and basically, there were no other areas that we can cut. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
So pretty much, to bring it down, that's where we know the savings of the estimated $700,000 in fund balance of the $1.8 million that's being used for this fiscal year is going to come from. It was in special education and with fixed charges. So all of those deficits per the audit, and we cannot go in with a negative. So I would still have to come to you at the end of the year
That money.
to
Yeah,
you know,
because we're
process the
required
budget
by
amendment.
State law to have a balanced budget.
Yes.
Right.
So essentially, when it comes to that, anytime when you get to year end, that's the savings. So that budget line that's covering, that has those available funds, we use that to cover those excess costs. And to be honest, I've sat with Dr. Couch, we went through line by line.
Yeah.
When I first got here, I worked with Bill Poor, we saved about $40,000 when we went to Centric and 10-4. There's no other way to really cut. And even now, it's just going to change the path of how certain expenses are going to be approved, certain things are going to, it doesn't just stop here, even how we operate. And we're going to have to look at our maintenance, our operations, and these things, and when you are fully staffed. The other times we had available, with COVID, we had a huge availability in instruction. That's all your instructional salaries, but there were some positions we did not fill for that year. So you have the savings with that, plus the health care that goes to attach to that, their retirement, their FICA, that's savings. You don't really fill a position. So we kind of, it's going to be an ongoing thing. And with the non-public, just to reassure you with that, we budgeted, well, we have, since I've been here, there's a budget of $575,000 for non-publics. In the beginning, we had about, I want to say, 4 or 5 students. It is now went down to about 2. So 2,000, I wouldn't move more than that, because it still leaves us with about 300,000. Even with the projected non-publics that are coming in, it's not going to hurt in that regard. And we already know, just so that everyone's aware and we put it out there, special education is required by law. We know it's going to be a need. This is just to kind of give you all front row center really where we're at. But if a student needs it for special education, we're going to follow the law and provide that. This is just for purposes of to get us to where we need to go.
Thank you.
No problem.
So I would just add, I mean, Dr. Couch gave us, 6 or 7 bullet points as to a starting point. I would specifically inquire, are there any questions regarding those bullet points so that we could move forward with the rest of the presentation?
Yeah, because I would like some direction with regard to your support with 25 students in the class. Because with that, then we can start then finalizing and moving forward with regard to the reductions that we think that we can have.
I think, something that we are probably all thinking about is the overpopulation at Garnett and what that does to their class sizes, and if we have the room there.
They're actually, well, if we reduce, then they have more room.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Were we able to clear out the storage room that was there and take that stuff to Wharton? Didn't we have one?
Yeah,
Okay.
right. But remember, they lost a teacher this year.
So they lost a teacher.
And,
Didn't Rock Hall has one class of 25 students.
Right.
Is it a 5th grade?
right.
Do we,
I mean, it would affect every school. I can tell you, if we use 25, it will affect every school.
Every school.
do we know our average right now for class size?
We've been gradually moving it up
Yeah.
a bit. Now, for instance, keep in mind, if you have a class of 31, then you're going to have 2 teachers for that, so then you bring that down, and then you've got really small classes. That's unavoidable. That's something I can't fix. But if you've got a class, say, a 3rd grade population of 25 kids, then we can't staff that with 2 teachers. That would just be 1 teacher. If we have a class of 5th graders at 25 kids, then that would be 1 teacher. Or if we have 3 teachers and each one of them has, 18, and whatever, then we might be able to cut it from 3 to 2. So that's what we're looking at. And our average class sizes, you can probably give that information.
Yeah, so it's like a little different from school to school, but right now, in Covina, about 21, 22 students. Garnett, about 23, 24 students. And then obviously, the example that Dr. Couch just gave for Rock Hall, there are a few instances that where, we're just over where the class has to get split with multiple teachers, where we end up with 14 and 13, or 15 and 15, or 16 and 15.
What about the 3-year-old program?
That's funded by a grant.
Oh, it is? Okay.
I'm just worried about, I understand what needs to be done, but what I'm worried about is how it's going to affect each individual student as far as their learning and their needs. And it's easy to be overlooked, even the more when the class is a little too big for the, what the teacher is able to do. And especially if they don't have anyone to help them. And it's no fault of theirs, it's just that it's a little overwhelming. Children and these students, it's overwhelming. So for me, I guess I would feel better, even though you can't guarantee that, if I knew there was some plan in place to help the teacher. I would be comfortable then with it being a bigger size. But right now, and then you have Kerwin, the Blueprint, which is offering tutoring. How's that going to work?
Well, there is a little bit of increase with tutoring, and so a lot of that is, we're using some of that for after-school tutoring. The late bus is in this proposed budget, or at least what I'm thinking moving forward is keeping that in place, tutoring for the high school students. We do have some tutoring monies in for the other schools, but as I stated with Leeds, we're using the student support coaches that are providing a lot of support for kindergarten through second grade or third grade. And so, that would help with regard to that. We do have a lot of supports in place right now, more so than we ever had. It isn't ideal, and we've always, not always, but we've kind of prided ourselves in being able to have really small class sizes. But one of the things that the Blueprint is about is that there's a substantial amount of research that shows that small class sizes don't necessarily result in improved academic scores. People say that a lot, but there's really no solid science that says a small class size is going to yield. If that was the case, we probably would be top in the state in some cases, obviously. I don't want to minimize what this does. I don't at all. This is a very, very difficult position that we're in.
Do we know, because I feel like Kerwin's kind of going to be phased in. And so, for example, do we know how much it's going to cost us to phase in what we need to for next year? For example, I'm thinking like universal pre-K. We kind of have a head start on probably many school districts because that's been a long-term part of our budget. So whereas other schools may be looking to find space and figure out how they're going to accommodate all these new 4-year-olds, we won't have to do that. Is there any way that Kerwin the reality of Kerwin will cause them to slow their roll a little bit so that we don't get slammed
Right.
all at once with this monumental cost?
Right. I think right now legislators and school systems, in particular superintendents, have been talking, at least on the Eastern Shore, we've been talking to our Eastern Shore delegation, that the 3-year-old program, implementing a full-fledged 3-year-old program right now is just almost impossible, because the money is just not there. Many school systems don't even have the facilities for 3-year-old programs.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. So that's problematic, but it's bigger than that. For us, we need an extra bus, we need an attendant on a bus. There's just so many moving parts that we would have to put in place. I think there's a lot of sentiment that we can at least slow down the 3-year-old program right now till we can kind of get our bearings on what we have to do right now with the requirements for Kerwin.
Could we look into, rather than a blanket class size policy, to see what the impact would be? Like, maybe we could say kindergarten through third is 20 kids through class. Like, can we stagger it a bit because of how much need the kids have at a younger age, as opposed to just saying it's a blanket 25 kids per
Yeah.
class?
I mean, obviously, we have a board meeting in a couple weeks, and I can come back and tell you what it means for each school.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah, that'd
interesting
be
to-
helpful.
I can actually give the board right now, what the range of what the smallest class size would look like to what the largest class size.
Well, I'm interested also in knowing if we make it, the standard 25 students per class when possible. In some cases, there'll be fewer than that because you've hit that over.
Yeah.
You can't have 35 kids in one class, and then you break it down, you end up with 17
Right.
in each. Would be interested.
I hesitate to, I mean, we've already analyzed it, and I pretty much have that number.
Okay.
But I hesitate to say it publicly until we've had a chance to talk
Okay.
with principals.
That's fine.
But, yes, I'll get you, just one second. But it's not going to be a huge number, okay? I mean, if we use the 25, I mean, it's not going to be 10 teachers. It's probably just going to be 5. It's not.
And it's another just drop in the bucket.
And it's another drop in the
Yeah.
bucket. And it's not going to be a huge number. But we also looked at some of our IAs that, particularly like in some cases where we had an IA assigned to a special education student that will not be coming back next year, well, then that's a position that we no longer need. So, things like that we tried to look at that would have the least impact on our students, but where we could realize some savings. There are also, we always get savings too from teachers that retire, because typically they're at the top of the scale, and then we end up hiring newer teachers that are not at the top of the scale. That didn't really hold true that much this year, because some of the people that retired, then we hired some high-paid teachers. But, overall, we think there will be some savings with retirements.
Would you say that currently we utilize the IAs in large class sizes, or
No.
are they determined by the need of the students in the class?
They're determined. We've not put in IAs with, we
Just
haven't
because of the
had.
large number?
We haven't
Okay.
really had larger classes. I mean, we had the 5th grade at Rock Hall, I think, was at 25 or 26 this year. And so we kind of made a decision last year to reduce. They had 2 teachers in that class, in that grade level the year before, and we could see the numbers coming up. And we said, we're not going to fill the position. The teacher left, and we didn't fill the position. And they stayed at 25. Yes.
I agree with Mrs. Dorsey about the class size and having volunteers in there. And I hear you saying that volunteers don't show up all the time, and I get that. They have their own lives, they're generally older people that are volunteering. But I do know that the mayor of Chestertown, I don't know where his email is, he says he knows of plenty of people that could help. I'm sure you've talked to him. There's people at Heron Point, and if you have classes at 25, it would be nice to get someone to come in. When you have 25 students, that's a lot to manage if you want to teach them. And I've heard different classes that some of the teachers or the students aren't doing their work. You need to have people looking at them and working with them. And I think she has a great idea, because if we have 25 students in a class, that's going to be challenging, in my opinion.
Right.
And how much is it going to save you?
A lot.
Like what kind of dollars are you talking? You're talking about staff, you'd have to reduce staff, correct?
Yeah, close to $600,000.
So that 600,000 comes off the administration or the instruction, or what would that come off of?
Instruction. Yeah, that would come by making our class sizes at 25.
No, but what line item on this budget amount would that come off of?
Well, it depends upon where they're at. I mean, if they're a special education teacher, it would come out of special education. If we've got a line item now, restricted line item for pre-K, so it could be any of those things. We have a class of 25 kindergartners at Rock Hall this year.
I would just think that you should somehow require people to help out, volunteers to help out, even if they don't show up all the time, find out what their schedules, if they come 3 days a week, it's going to give the teacher some assistance if you want to save this money. It's my opinion, and I think you have a great idea with that, because a lot of these kids just aren't going to learn.
Dan, can you speak to how volunteer coordination is going right now with the new HR person?
So we are processing a large number of volunteers each week. I think, in all of the schools, we're up to about 80 volunteers. Now, but when we say volunteer, that's a very broad term. There's people that come in for one day. There's people that sometimes go on like field trips. But the coordinated effort that I think we're talking about here, involves a much, much greater depth of planning and involvement with each individual school. There's a great amount of training that would have to go into all of that. So when we're using the word volunteer, it's a very broad term right now. With the additional person in HR, yes, it's been extremely helpful to understand, who's in our schools and what they're doing.
But, I think volunteers are great, but if I'm a parent, I want the people in my child's classroom to be certified in instruction. Not that there isn't a ton of expertise from Lake Heron Point. There are a lot of really accomplished people, but an aeroscience engineer who's retired at Heron Point may not be the best quote-unquote volunteer to come into pre-K or to tell a kid to behave himself. I mean, I don't know how you justify to a parent, well, you know what, we just stuck a volunteer in there. I don't get that.
Well, to your point about volunteers, it's one thing to have volunteers where they're volunteering their time and give what they either can or want. It's another thing to have a volunteer that you're telling them, I need you to be there Thursday afternoon every week for the first half of the year from 1 to 4 p.m. And then on the off weeks, or every other week in the off week, it's going to be Tuesday morning from 7:30 to 10. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying that
I'm not saying it's not possible either. I'm just saying it's a challenge.
Yeah, so we just have to be mindful that, that's going to be and it's not that it's not worth it, but it's going to be a heavy lift.
And I don't think we're saying not to.
Right.
No.
Try to.
Oh, absolutely.
No, we're not
bring in
saying not
volunteers.
to.
We'd love volunteers right now.
Oh, yeah.
To be in.
I just want to say that, ask a question. What type of training would a volunteer have to just basically come in a classroom and they're not teaching the child? The teacher is doing that, but it frees the teacher up to do so when there's a second set of eyes, because a lot of times in the classroom, especially in the elementary stage, you have the teacher trying to teach, you have another child over here doing something, maybe kicking another student, etc., or kicking several students. It's never solved, so no one's doing anything about it. This becomes a bullying situation, but the teacher is not specialized in behavior. So she doesn't even see it. She's just trying to do what she's there to do. So, I mean, I may have gotten off a little bit with that, but that's the kind of thing that happens. And when it's not corrected or no one sees it, you end up making or manufacturing several bullies that weren't bullies, but now I gotta be in order to, get them off of me, or I'm just gonna go along with the bully. Then we have more troubled students in the class. She started out with 4 or 5, now she has 6 or 7. And the other thing that other than wanting to know what type of training would a person have to have, especially if they're maybe have already experienced being a parent, or, if they just come in and they don't even have any experience with children whatsoever, that's a whole nother thing. They could come in there and it just be overwhelming. The other thing is, they may not be able to give their time and say, I definitely could be here every single day for 3 days a week, from 7 to 10 or from 2 to 4, et cetera. But I do believe that if they came in one day, that's one day more than what you would have if we don't implement something. I'm just saying, it's no guarantee that it's going to work. It's no guarantee that you would have enough volunteers or enough people to come in and fill this need. But it's better than no plan at all. That's all I'm saying. If we have another plan, I myself, I have no problem listening to that. But I'm just trying to see if we have anything. That could kind of work until we could get something else in place that may work better. But I'm trying to figure what type of training, because back in the day, we didn't have to have training. We just came in and we were more like parent helpers, but we would help the teacher. We're just following the teacher's instructions. We're not there to take over or to try to teach the child, because that's not my profession.
So at a minimum, if they're going to be working directly with the student, they would have to undergo the same type of training that our substitutes do, which would require a training on, our policies regarding, child abuse and all of our other procedures and policies that our, staff have to follow. The, drug-free alcohol workplace, similar to what all of our volunteer coaches get. All of our substitutes get, in addition, are trained in the behavior support strategies that I do. But with the volunteers right now and the individual schools, depending on what they're there for, it's really coming down to an individual school basis. Like, for instance, I'm almost certain a high school gave their own volunteer training for their volunteers last week. So I think, what the level of usage is going to be is really going to dictate, what training is actually needed. But at a minimum, they're going to have to undergo, what our substitutes get.
So this would be a one-time training? I mean, you're not paying them.
Each year,
Well, each year, one time, once a year.
it depends, I do a substitute training just, usually about once a month, maybe once every other month. So again, it would depend on the number of volunteers and when they're coming in.
You mentioned that you've got a pretty big group of volunteers, right? What sorts of things are they volunteering for?
It's really, right now, it's, school field trips, coming in as as a class helper here and there, coming in to help with a celebration. Nothing, truly, that is consistent, like I think what we're talking about right now. Obviously, we're aware of the volunteer group out of Rock Hall, and some stuff after school, but a lot of the volunteers that we're processing right now are more of those, one time or a few times per year.
So for discussion purposes, I mean, if we do go to this bumping up to 25 students per class, then there's an understanding, I think, with everyone in the room, that we would also look at the volunteer structure and see what we can do there, right?
Right.
Okay, so we can, kind of look at that, and then I think, are we looking at budget requests next?
Yep.
Okay.
One of the things that struck me about the budget request, without even looking at what any of them were, more than half of them were recurring. So it's not a one and done. There are 14 that are a one-time, and there are 27 of them that are recurring.
Right.
That's problematic.
Right, what we tried to do is look through all of these lists, and of course, I asked the principals if it was a want or a need, and you'll see most of them said they were all needs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get it. We, every year, we struggle with trying to fund the things that and our schools are getting old, and so there are lots of things that they need. So I get all of that. But for instance, the counselor at KCHS, of course, we're required by the Workforce Investment Board to hire a career counselor that would help with the high school and the middle school. So that's one thing. The astronomy, environmental science textbooks, we're reviewing our federal funds to see if we can purchase those out of there, those textbooks out of those funding. The World Language Spanish 3 digital textbook, I put that as a FY 2024 requirement, so that would be something we can't do without that. The auto mechanics textbooks, we would review to see if we could get those out of federal funds. The gym lights, that's replacing the outdated gym lights at Kent County Middle School into LED lights. I put a question mark there.
Do they still have any more, does it still exist, aging school grants?
Remember, we're using the aging school grant for the tennis courts.
Okay, just I was thinking.
Yeah, that
Gotcha.
would be
Okay.
perfect, but, yeah.
Okay.
Wait, they're replacing the lights in the middle school, even though we're getting a...
Well, we don't know that for sure. I mean, but
Yeah,
that's
that's just one of
something
the
to consider. I mean,
Okay.
but then, on the other hand, do you really want to just not do anything to that building
Yeah.
and just,
Okay.
let the kids just say, well, when will you get a new school? I don't know when that will
It's
be.
a lot of difficult decisions, it looks
Yeah,
like.
a lot of plates in the air. Chorus teacher, the middle school would like a chorus teacher. They'd like a floating science social studies teacher. They'd like a social worker. They've got a halftime social worker. There's a request to add 4 days to the guidance secretary's contract.
How, you mean 4 days over the course of the school year? Oh, okay.
Media carpet replacement, that's a question mark. The LED gym lights at Rock Hall Elementary School, that's a request, and we have a quote for that, and that's $3,500. The Lakeshore Storage Space Makers, we think we can get that out of the ESSER funding. Doorknobs keyed the same, that's about a $100,000 request to.
That sounds pretty important.
Right, but that's.
I know,
big-ticket
I'm just
item.
saying, in terms of
But all of our
school
schools.
security, I'm just
all
saying,
of-
yeah.
I know, and I get that, and that could be in the security grant that we get every year, that we could put that in there as well. The 40 student desks, we would get that out of ESSER. The install the hooks at Garnett in the wooden cubbies, we don't have a price for that. I don't think it would be that much, but that's a question mark. Replace carpet in room 116. One cafeteria table. That was a want. She put that as a want. Backstage curtains. She put that as a want. We don't have a cost for that. Painting. We think that that can be accomplished out of our current budget and done during the summer. Increase work hours for the vestibule IA at Garnett. We have a cost for that. We put as something possible. District science field experiences. This is for our students to go to Echo Hill. Request is $12,000 for that, and we said that really is a requirement. The elementary science textbooks, we're proposing to switch the curriculum. As you saw, our science, our standing in science in 5th grade and 8th grade is not the best. We have been researching and determining what's been used in other districts, and we found a curriculum that we think would be wise to change over, but it's going to require $68,000. We're going to review to see if it can be taken out of ESSER. It's a one-time funding. Then the following year in FY '25, we have to replace the items in the science kits that come with the would come with the science program. So that, we just changed that to say, well, that isn't required until FY '25. So that one can get taken off. '24 you can probably cross that one off. Add 1 day to elementary counselors. There's a cost for that. Digital IM licenses, that's for our math program. And so that's a requirement, that's $7,000. The Fine Arts Core Program, that's $14,000, that's a requirement. Diagnostic reading assessments, that's a requirement. NWEA MAP, we need an additional 100 seats, that's $1,300. Replacement panels for the Fine Arts Showcase, that's $3,000. They're worn out, so they need to be replaced, that's a requirement. World language subscription, $500, that's a requirement. Increased legal budget, we're putting in $45,000 for that. 33 and 34 can be crossed off, that is no longer a need. Request from athletics, and we said it's a requirement for next year for the rotation of uniforms for athletics. They need an increase of their budget of $6,000. I put that as a requirement. Hire 2 6-hour food service workers, and we put that as possible because what we would do is take it from the substitutes that we're not able to hire on a rotating basis, and then transfer that budget into hiring 2 6-hour service workers. A position reclassification in the finance department would move our employee that's doing grant monitoring into an exempt position, which means they're not bound by an established work day, and they work until the job gets done, and they do all the grants that are needed for monitoring our grants. Remember, keep in mind, the more grants that we get, the more monitoring that's required out of all of that.
Yeah, and then the problem with grants is, what do you do once they've expired? You know,
Yep.
they're not a guarantee year after
Right.
year.
Bus driver trainer, that's a question mark, that's another recurring. Athletic field trip driver, it's already being accomplished by our contractors. I think one of the concerns that I have is if we hire somebody to be the athletic field trip driver, then they're our employee, we have to pay FICA, insurance. Yeah, we're paying the contractors, but that's
Right.
money that we don't have to, assume on a recurring basis. Special needs bus, this has to be done. We've got a bus that's going out at the end of next year. And I think if we were to get a new bus, we would lease it, like, we'd have that rotating cost that we have on an annual basis, and I think it's about $12,000 a year, isn't it? Isn't that what we're paying on our buses right now, per bus, annually? About $12,000.
How many students ride the special needs bus at a time?
It just depends.
Okay,
But
but do we have just one special needs bus that picks up in the county?
No, we have
Okay.
more than one.
Yeah, I just wondered, and this is probably a stupid thing, but it's because I'm not educated in this department. We did buy a couple of vans, didn't we?
Right.
Is there such a thing as a special needs van?
Well, that's what our vans and board cars are pretty much being used for, to
Okay.
transport
Yeah.
those students.
Okay, gotcha.
So that, I mean, I would put an asterisk next to 40 because we've got a responsibility there. We say it's $120,000, but that's if you buy it outright. So I would change that to $12,000 if we lease it. I mean, if we put it on a payment plan. It's not really leasing it, we're buying it, but we pay
On
for
the
it
installment
annually.
plan.
Yeah, annual installment payment. And then we have 2 maintenance vans that are 15 years old that are in pretty bad shape. And so we're proposing to put them on the enterprise lease, and that would run about $7,200 a year. And that concludes all of our requests.
In the past, as I recall, we did have someone make a community member make a donation to help cover the cost of textbooks. Is it a possibility that that could happen again?
Well, keep in mind, that could happen again, yes. And you're talking about the reoccurring, the things that we know we have to have. The one-time textbook purchases, we're proposing that we would take it through ESSER, which is the federal funds. So I don't think we would need to do that. But I guess I need some direction from you with regard, I mean, if we add more people, then we're going in the opposite direction.
Right.
Then, I mean, it's just like, as hard as it is, and I know everybody, listen, this is no different than the county's budget, the town's budget. Everybody always asks for more than what you actually have. I mean, I get that. It's all about prioritizing and trying to make the best decision about how we get through the year and building our budget.
Well, I'm looking, if I understood you correctly, there's about 9 of these things that we have to do for fiscal year 2024.
Yeah, and they're not huge ticket items, but they do add up.
Okay.
I have a question about this figure, 1,796,000.
Wait, where are you going?
It's on
the
page.
last page, page 11.
Is that the number that, I was trying to figure out, because a couple of pages before where it says 948,000, it says 918,000. I'm just wondering if that's just something I'm not reading correctly, but the bottom number here is.
So the 918 is just if we move forward with
All the requests.
all the requirements, like those non-negotiables in the beginning, which were the fixed charges with the health, the retirement,
Okay.
and those things. This slide puts it all in perspective. So if you take the 447,000, which were the adjustments to keep us at the bare, just to make ends
What we
meet,
have to cut.
plus
Right.
this 400,000, which were our non-negotiables. That's with your health care, your FICA, and all of that. The 948 is your budget request. And if you add those together, it's going to give you, those together gives you that 1.3 million, and then when you get to the amount of funds needed, it's the 1.796.
Which we
that
know we
we'll
can't
need.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we just wanted to give you all of those numbers. So that's why we took it back to the basics at the very beginning, on the harsh reality of what we need to do to balance our budget before we even move forward with new requests and with considering what we need to do with our salary increases for our staff.
I wanted to circle back before we ended up about the class size. I don't want to elaborate, but do you have any comments on that class size? 25 students, and you're in the classes. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm in high school, which I feel like is a lot different numbers. 25 in high school is definitely a lot different than 25 in elementary school, because I'm in the TAM program, and I've been in elementary schools where we've had 25 students, and I feel like it's a lot. But also, I'm not into the financial stuff, but it doesn't seem like we have a whole lot of room for other options at this point. So, I mean, I feel like 25 is fine in high school, but I'm not a professional, so.
Just wanted your opinion, that's all. Nice.
Right.
So I want to make sure that my notes are correct, that before we add the additional costs required by Kerwin, and before we entertain any of these budget requests, we'd have to reduce the budget by $918,000. Is that correct? Okay. So I said it doesn't include Kerwin, it doesn't include budget requests. Does it include salaries?
No.
Doesn't include salaries either?
No.
Shazam.
Yep.
Okay, so if we take off the 600,000, you're saying the class size, then that leaves another 400,000, or 500,000 we have to come up with to reduce. Could we balance that out percentage-wise on all the other things and make an equal kind of?
Can't do it, because as I said, when we went through
I get it.
each of the different categories, we were already over in instruction. We were already over in some of the other areas. We're over in many of the, because what happens is, we hired new people, they
I
came
get
at
it.
a different step. We went through every single item, and those were the two items that we felt comfortable that we could reduce.
So, also, I have a question for the 600,000 you were
Well,
talking about.
that's close, I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
throwing that out.
So people would be leaving, but would we have to, like, let anyone go to make that
We
happen?
we don't
We
know.
hope not.
You
We don't know, we hope not. We have,
Okay, I was just confused on
yeah,
the
we have
nutrition word.
we have some mobility every year. We do know some people that are retiring or already looking to go to a different location for various reasons. So we feel like we can accomplish a lot of these reductions through attrition by people leaving on their own, either retiring, resigning, or taking a job elsewhere.
Okay.
So
good. I just,
we feel like we can accomplish that,
Just to get to even.
just to get to even.
And that's not including negotiated salary, that's not including budget requests.
Correct.
Or Kerwin.
Or, no, it does include the things, well, it does include the WIB requirement
Yeah.
for the career counselor. That is a
So-
requirement of Kerwin.
But it does, so would it be,
And it also includes the dual credit that we know we have to do for our students. That's
so
included in this
it does
budget.
include some of the costs required by
It does
Kerwin?
include,
Okay.
it does not include the salary increase request for Kerwin.
So
Gotcha.
if we were to add in the budget requests that were required versus this complete ask, I mean, obviously the picture looks different.
Right?
Do we, I mean, roughly, what is, I mean, instead of 1.7, it would be,
I'd have to add up all of those things. I mean, if we just do the.
1.2?
I did a rough
Okay.
calculation of one times being around 100K, so it would be 100K less
Okay.
for the recurring, so around 778,000 instead of 870.
Okay, so
But
we're-
that doesn't include any of the quotes that we haven't received.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right, I know. It's tough,
Lovely.
it's ugly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that we're trying to be very responsible in terms of looking to see what we can move one-time purchases, the textbooks, all of those, just make that clear, what we can pay for, what we can buy out of the federal funding that we know we have available. I mean, I don't think that you're going to be able to tell me right now how you feel about all of the recurring budgetary requests, but I would,
Can we see, next meeting, 2 weeks from now, a comparison that reflects the recommended changes that you recommended back earlier in the presentation with the, they're not even requests, with the budget required?
the FY '24 requirement.
About 9 FY '24 required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because and then if we know where we start, right, where, now again, not including salaries, but if we have that number, and then we start, I don't want to say backfilling, we start upfilling if we feel there's a need, and then, I mean,
Yep.
it seems like it's gloomy to begin with, but at least we can get through some of the,
Right.
just
and-
as a comparison.
Right, and it'll give us an opportunity to meet with the health department. That's the next thing. We're meeting internally about it next week, and then we want to be able to meet with the health department to see, because I have not really factored in what that possible savings might be.
In your discussions with other superintendents who are facing challenges, and every school district is bigger than us, so it stands to reason that every school district's budget is bigger than ours, so they may have to cut more, but it might be the same percentages we're required to
Right.
cut. Has you guys trying to collectively come up with some creative I mean, is there anything anybody's doing that we might be able to do?
Well,
Or let me phrase this, maybe in 2 weeks, you could explore that, just to say, hey, I never thought of this, but, you
Yeah.
know. I
Well-
will tell you that I just read today, so we're talking about all the cuts we need to do. Cecil County just presented their budget, and they want to add 64 positions.
Yeah, and
So-
they're requesting additional
I
funding.
know.
Big money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to say one thing. I've discussed this before with most of the people on this board. When I ran for this position, my goal was to get the community involved. And I would like to try, there's people in this community that have the monies that could help out the school system. I'm not saying it'll work or not, but I would like the opportunity to try to do that, not for a physical structure or for anything that we can use, books or anything like that. I don't see anything wrong with engaging the community as one person. I don't want to have to, I'd like to individually meet with people, but I think there's possibilities. There's people in this county that have the resources, I think, that would be willing to help the school system. I'm not guaranteeing that, but I'd like to try. I mean, I want to go out and try. I think it's worth the effort, because we're talking about, we don't have any money. Then we're talking about Kerwin, and then we're talking possibly about a new school. I mean, there's no money. I'm looking at this as a business person, that I would like the opportunity just to talk to some people and engage and say, this is where we are, you know?
Is it possible that the foundation could have a new bucket? I think that we had kind of talked before about other ways to engage the community to support us, and there was an idea about adopt a school. So maybe we have, we have the many grants for teachers, we have something where you can get the 40 desks that Garnett needs. But, I mean, to me, the desks for students, if we were doing what do we have to get today, for me, that would be one of the first things.
Well, that's coming out of ESSER.
Yeah, good.
Well, for several years, school furniture kept getting cut. It was
Yeah.
put in, and
Yeah.
it kept getting cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
Good, I'm
think,
glad it's coming out of ESSER.
if I may, I think for purposes of the budget, I mean, we have to go with what we know right now, right? Or at least what we're seeing.
Right.
We don't know exactly, we know the asks, we know some of the information, and quite frankly, we still don't know what is final necessarily for numbers. But I think for the exercise, we have to look at what we know today, and it's exactly the numbers and what we have to do. And the other items that are on here, if it's icing on the cake and somewhere down the line.
You get more money, we can always
foundation
put
or
them back
something,
in.
then you just,
Right.
then the
Put them
board
back
can
in.
look at it and figure out what's going on. But I think we have to move, we have to look at the process and honor it the way it's, with the multiple meetings coming up and everything we do. Just let's go through the steps. That's my opinion. Let's go through the steps, and if there's butter, left over that we can add to or whatever, I mean, who knows?
Right, well, we don't know also, there's that unknown, and what I said to staff is, we don't know what's going to happen with the legislature.
We don't know.
So there could be additional funding that could come with the final budget approval that may come our way, but I can't build a budget on what may. And if we build a balanced budget and we see additional funding and we can put stuff back in, then let's put stuff back in,
Yeah.
if that's what we decide to do. But it also depends upon how much fund balance we use, because we go ahead and cut our budget and we reduce the recurring, and then we say use $1 million of, I'm just throwing a number out, we use $1 million of our fund balance, and then we add more recurring, then it just means that's how much further off the mark we're going to be in '25. So perhaps that would reduce what our obligation would be for fund balance. which makes us even more fiscally responsible. So, but we have to build our budget on worst-case scenario, and this is it.
And to your point, though, as we start to funnel down, knowing what additional asks are, we may be pleasantly surprised in different areas, right? I mean,
Right.
maybe legislation comes in big for Kent County, or comes in, and all of a sudden there's assistance there. I mean, who knows? So, yeah, I mean, I think we have to just start with kind of,
So
Pulling down.
to your question, Mr. Rhodes, I would say it's premature to be talking to people right now until we have a better idea of what it is we need to do to build our budget.
I hear what you're saying, but if I want to go talk to someone and say, I would like to see if you might be able to help with some of these projects, I don't want to push it off and push it off. I would like to just be able to open a discussion with people, because this is not a good situation here, and I think there's people in this county, just ask them. I mean, I have lots of people I've dealt with in my business over the years. Who knows, I might not be able to do anything, but I'd like to try. I'd like to try to bring some money in the school system. And if I do, I don't think there's anything wrong with that as a citizen going out and talking to people. Although I'm on the board, but I can put a different hat on, like Mrs. McGee would always say she has. How many hats do you have? So,
Just one tonight.
yeah. So if I go ask X, and I would like to see if we can get $100,000 or $200,000 for something, and they say they're interested, I want to be able to bring that forward. I want to try. I want to do something. And that's what I did when I ran for this job. I want to engage our community. And I don't think a lot of our community knows about this school system. They send their kids to different schools, private schools, out of state. That's all I want to do, is make an effort.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Let's say you're going out to do that, and I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
And let's say that somebody says, you know what, I could give you the $8,500 for the student desks, okay? What if, does that lock the school district into, like, that's how that money would be spent?
yes.
Okay.
You'll be restricted.
But what if, as a board, there was something else, I mean, one of these requirements that we have to fund, and that $8,500 could have really helped us there?
It would be as if someone was restricting.
Okay.
Obviously, there's two
The
types,
donation.
right? There's restricted
Yeah.
or not
Right, yeah.
restricted.
In kind or-
If it was restricted, it would be as if I walked into Procalinos, looked at the menu and ordered whatever I wanted, and if I
Right.
decided on a meatball parm, there better be a meatball parm on my counter.
Yeah, I got
On my
you.
table,
I
right?
got
So
you.
so that's exactly what it comes down to.
Yeah, I get, and I don't know why I go down the rabbit hole, and I apologize, but I'm just trying to think, how could we explain to somebody else, for example, a requirement is the replacement panels for the Fine Arts Showcase, okay? And the money was for the desks. How do we explain to the general public, well, you know what? Yeah, you were a priority, but the people who gave us the money said, spend it on the desks. How do we do that, you know?
Could he, when you go out, direct it more towards the things that are requirements first? I mean, he could figure out or find out through people who know what's needed, more so than the desk, and go on that. That's the only thing I could say, and address that first. If you put it out there, you put out what's...
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm wondering if there's a way we could collectively, as a board, say, okay, these are our priorities. This is what, for example, if Mr. Rhodes is going to go out in the community, these are our priorities that we'd like to seek funding for.
Well, that's why I'm saying is, it might help for us to get to a place where we...
Oh, yeah, I'm not ready to jump. I'm just
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah, I think we need to, as I mentioned earlier, in 2 weeks, let's look at this, look at what comes off the table because it's a requirement, then identify what is there, or what the requests are, and then we figure it out. I mean, this process continues. We have how many more meetings? 3 more meetings?
I don't have it in
We have
front of
two
me.
next month.
We
Two next
have,
month.
we have the 13th, and then we have the 27th,
Yeah.
I think, outlined.
And I think we're going to need that 27th
Oh, we
now.
absolutely are
Yeah.
going to need that 27th.
Can I just make an ask, though, as well? I mean, if there are some, I would really, and I don't know if it's, I mean, I think it'd be a really great idea that if we're having these conversations with some of the big-ticket people or the people that have, is it possible to have someone from the system meeting also with Mr. Rhodes? If someone goes to, I don't know, John Doe, and John Doe is a retired gazillionaire, and John Doe wants to, I mean, it would be nice to, once we get what our focus is, to have someone be able to have that conversation with the board member, whether it's a superintendent or whoever it may be, just to have, I don't know, just a thought. I mean, I think it'd be kind of neat to show that there's this, I don't know, access to these asks.
Well, I think it might be helpful if, let's say, Mr. Rose getting ready to reel somebody in.
I don't want it to look like that.
No, but what I'm saying is, wouldn't it be helpful if there was somebody that was more knowledgeable than us, being able to explain a little bit, really the ins and outs of how the budget works and what we have to do and stuff like that, just so that they kind of have a better understanding of what's being asked of them and how their money would be
Well, and
applied.
there's also the potential that they will want to wait and say, well, no one has said no to us, yet about the things that we're asking for. And so maybe they want to wait until somebody says no to us to say, yes, I will buy the desk, or yes, I will buy the carpet. Because at this point, we haven't
We haven't even
we
made
haven't
those
asked
asks.
anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
and that's a great point. I mean, so the process, I keep talking about the process, we keep rolling down, this path. We also have the county commissioners to ask.
Yeah.
And there's been comments made about, that they would be willing to help.
But we need to get to what
Yes,
that number
to
is.
a number, yeah.
We don't know what that is yet.
They're going to ask for, what is the number, and what, am I getting a meatball parm, or am I getting a special sub?
What's, when's the first time you have any
They're good, too.
conversation with them?
They sent me an email and requested us to choose some dates. And we chose, I can't remember what dates we chose.
It's in April.
I know, but I don't remember the two dates.
So we won't have a discussion with them until,
Well,
it a work session?
I would propose
Okay.
that when we get to that place, that we know what it is, the number is, I would propose that we have a individual meeting with them prior to the ask.
yeah, I was thinking, yeah, the sooner
Yes,
we
sooner
know
rather.
that,
Yeah.
which allows more time for a discussion of back and forth and, as opposed to somebody having their back up against the wall and they have to make a decision just like that.
I agree.
Okay. What do you need, Dr. Couch, from this point in this discussion?
No,
Are you-
I think what I hear from you is you'd like to see what it looks like when we move forward with the 25 in a class, have an opportunity to meet with the health department to see where the savings might be there, be able to formalize some additional reductions that we think that we can make, see what that number is that we get to, add up all of the FY '24 requirements, like I didn't put down that the bus was a requirement, but truly is because it's going out of service.
Yeah.
So that is a requirement as well. I think you need to see what that is to see where we go backwards in time with
So
the
the
number.
volunteers are not in that? I thought we said they might be included or not.
Well, I think I can't add the volunteers in the budget.
I understand
No,
that,
they
but
don't
I
get
mean,
paid.
we discussed that we would, didn't you say something about the volunteers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, that's something we absolutely would work towards. We just need to understand a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, and I think we also need to talk to our school principal also.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of work to do. But yeah, I mean, certainly, it's not off the table.
Okay?
Okay. Okay, so I'm assuming that was for information purposes only, no action was required at this time. Thank you, Ms. Stewart, thank you, Dr. Couch. The next item on the agenda is public participation. Mr. DeVillio, do we have any members?
We do not.
We do not, okay. So that was odd, asking you instead of Ms. Gale. So I had to look at you, I'm like, I know he's sitting there. The next item on the agenda is the notification of our next meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County will be held on Monday, March 13th, 2023, beginning at 5 p.m. with the open session. Open session will be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session will resume at 6:30 p.m. This meeting will be located at the administrative building in the boardroom, this room, at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661. The last item on the agenda is to adjourn. The administration is recommending approval to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to do so?
Before we adjourn, we decided that the next Citizens Advisory Committee meeting will be on April 17th at 5:30, and I just want to remind folks that currently the deadline to submit an application is March 1st, but we may talk about that some more at the next meeting. So
Okay.
April 17th at 5:30.
And also, the PTSA meeting got postponed as well
The dodgeball meeting.
Oh, really? Wasn't it tomorrow?
KCHS.
for tomorrow.
Yeah.
It got postponed.
Does
right?
it have a date?
It doesn't, I didn't see a date for
Okay.
I
a
don't think they-
rescheduled date. I just
Gotcha.
want to make sure people
Okay, thank you.
know that.
Thank you.
And the CAC application forms are on the school website.
Yes.
Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I make the motion.
Mr. Rhodes has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Mr. Wallace?
Aye.